Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Deconversionists with your hosts, Alan Bondar, a.k.a. the Unraveler, and my co-host, Elliott Christopherson. Can we grieve a God who never existed? Well, one thing's for sure is we can grieve sleep, because I am tired, and Elliott is tired, and we are grieving sleep.
So you have us at a disadvantage if you call in. We're not going to be on our A game, so go crazy.
Yes, I'm happy.
Chance.
I'm really hoping somebody calls in. Yes.
If I can twist you into a pretzel verbally on no sleep last night, then you know you really suck. So now it's your chance.
And that is our invitation to call in the show. You got to hop in, though, if you want to join us. In fact, now
my excuse for failure will be that, oh, well, this isn't a debate show. We're just here to have a friendly conversation. So I guess it's win-win either way.
Yes. I am actually open room link. I am actually popping this in the chat right now. I forgot to do it. Here we go, y'all. The links are in, and they are being pinned as we speak. All right, so now you have no excuse. Now you have to call in. But listen, tonight's an interesting night because with Life After Faith taking a tiny bit of a hiatus with Drew Bekius there, we happen to be doing a few episodes right now that are dealing with Life After Faith. So it's a perfect opportunity for theists who might be missing the Wednesday night shows to call in here and talk with Elliott and I, who have both come out of Christianity and would love to talk to you, because maybe you are a person who is grieving a God who never existed. And we'd love to talk to you about it. So this is a great chance. So if you're a theist, we want to invite you to call in and talk with us. We'll just have a great conversation. If you're an atheist who would like to tell us whether or not you can grieve a God who's never existed, or you want to convince us that your God does exist and we shouldn't be grieving him, or as some theists say, if you're grieving God, then it means he's calling you home. Call in and talk to us about that. We'd like to hear it because, as Elliott and I are always saying, look, if there is any good reason for us to believe a God exists, we'd like to know it. So far, we've not encountered it. Elliott, have you encountered it?
I have not. There are reasons to believe a God exists, but if those are good reasons or not is where the debate happens. Now, I believe I haven't found any good reasons, but I'm fully aware that there are many just regular old plain reasons to believe in a God. I'm just not convinced by any of them, and I find the counter arguments against the existence of a God far more convincing. But in the end, it's all comes down to how you judge it. So we want to know how you judge it, and then we can tell you whether you're judging it correctly or not using our own subjective judgment. So it's just a circle anyway, but hey, let's have some fun, right?
Yeah, let's have some fun. Well, we'd love to talk to some callers tonight because we need your help to keep us awake. So please call in and have a dialogue with us so that we're not having to come up with stuff when we're tired. This would be great. But, tonight's conversation is, can we grieve a God who never existed? And, let's talk a little bit about coming out of Christianity, Elliott. Because tonight we're talking about that, and then next week, just so everybody knows, while we have fresh ears and viewers, next week you're going to be on with Jim Barrows with a topic called "Leaving Christianity: Why It Hurts." That's another great one for Christians to call in or ex-Christians to call in and talk about it and see where they are, because it does hurt when you leave Christianity for many, many reasons. And over the years, it gets easier. But it is very much like losing a friend to death in a lot of ways. For me, it was. I mean, the moment of awakening, the moment of clarity, where, and I've given my story before, where I was quite literally on a prayer walk. I had no desire to exit Christianity. I wasn't looking for an out. I wasn't trying to escape. I wasn't trying to run to some sinful life. It was nothing like that. I wasn't even aware that I was deconverting. It wasn't even on my radar. And here I am on a prayer walk, and my book that's coming out soon called Unravelation, How Those of Faith Find Freedom. It discusses all of this and what was going on behind the scenes that I didn't realize. And it discusses how I escaped and why, and it helps people do the same thing that I did. But I wasn't aware that I was, escaping. And And so here I was in the middle of a prayer walk, quite literally talking to God, asking for him to heal me and reveal himself to me, because I was in a lot of pain. And it was in that moment, like halfway through the prayer, that it was just this awakening that just happened. I couldn't explain it other than that. It was just like something snapped in my mind. And it was just like this tornado in my head that was just, I was just in absolute turmoil. And it was in that very, very moment, just peace. Like I couldn't even explain, just this incredible peace. Like I woke up and I was like, I think I'm an atheist. It was the weirdest moment for me, but that's exactly how it happened. I was just literally awoke in that very moment. And I was like, what am I doing? Who am I talking to? There's nobody there. I like my life flashed before my eyes in that very moment. And I was just like,
oh, wow.
I was like, I remember all these things that was happening. I remember planting my church, like in these moments, like all the things that I had to do. And I was like, where was God? He was nowhere. I was doing all the work. I remember all the healing I had to go through over the 2 years previous from losing my church and my marriage. Where was God? I had to do all the damn work. I had to go to therapy. I had to do the homework. There was no God. No matter how much I prayed, he never showed up to assist me. I thought about all growing up, where all the times that I got picked on and harmed, and there was no God that helped me. Like all these things were just like boom, 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 like instantly through my mind. And I was just like, there's no God there. It was instant for me. It was not even hard. It was just this freeing moment, super easy to just recognize I was an atheist. I didn't even have to question it.
Actually, what really happened was that moment of enlightenment was the Holy Spirit giving up on you and pulling out and going back to heaven.
Yes.
And abandoning you to your sins because you just couldn't stop doubting, Ellen.
Yes, the Holy Spirit was
finally just gave up on you. Like, this guy's just not, he's a double-minded man, and he's just not going to get there. So we're just going to leave him. And whoosh, the burden was lifted. Holy Spirit left you.
And to be honest, Elliott, that may very well be what happened. I would love to have a Christian call in and help me understand what I did wrong, why the Holy Spirit pulled out in that moment, what changed, what was going on, what did I do? I would love to hear where I went wrong to make God suddenly, after 42 years of my life, just pull out and abandon me in that moment. I'd love to know it.
Well, I could pretend to be that Christian for you.
You could, I'm sure, but you probably wouldn't be as convincing. Well, I'm not sure any Christians I've talked to have been very convincing anyway. You might be more convincing now that I think about it. But anyway, like it was,
maybe a fellow atheist will lead you back to the Lord.
Maybe it's quite possible. But I mean, the reality is I am not convinced anymore that there is any naturalistic scientific evidence or empirical data to demonstrate a God. It's just not there. Right. Even Christians I talk to admit that there's nothing like that can demonstrate a God. And for now, I am not content to just embrace a method like faith that doesn't work. It's just faith anything can be taken on faith. So as much as Christians love to say, well, you just have to have faith, that's not good enough for me, because I can just have faith that the tooth fairy created the universe. Like, there's nothing about faith that is reliable that I can use to verify that a God exists. So,
well, what if you took faith out of it and you just stacked up all of the evidential and logical arguments that Christians use? Do you think you could get to a God if maybe you tried hard enough without using faith?
If I tried hard enough, no.
Do you think it's even possible for a reasonable person to become convinced that a God exists based upon the common Christian arguments?
No. And I've dealt with every single one of them in my book. I believe you've dealt with them all in your book. I've heard these. They've been around for thousands of years. There's just no grounds, no justification to conclude that a God exists based on empirical data. See, here's what the Christian does, and this is what I did. And this is partly, what my unraveling did. This is what I started to see, and without even realizing I was seeing it. This is what was happening behind the scenes. Is so as a Christian, you've already come to conclude that God exists and that you need Jesus by faith, right? That's where it starts. And the faith is a brainwashing tactic that takes place while you're growing up, especially if you're raised in the Christian in the church. But I'm convinced that everybody who becomes a Christian, typically that's the way it happens. Like, even if you aren't a Christian growing up, you're inundated with God. We've talked about this hundreds of times. I don't need to reiterate it, but you're inundated with God. And so, when a time of trouble, tension, or transition happens, you just cry out to God because you're hurting. You need something. That's what I was doing for the 2 years that I was in pain after my divorce and losing my church and everything. I was begging God. I just wanted healing, and I thought he was the only one that would be there for me, because that's what you're taught, everybody else might leave you, but God will never leave you. The Lord is always there for you. He will never break a bruised reed. He's always there. And so I was begging. He was never coming to heal me. So it was very, very frustrating. But and then, of course, the whole traditional thing is, well, you just didn't do this enough. You didn't do that enough. So it falls back on you. You're always to blame. No matter how much God fails you, it's your fault. But at any rate, what's happening then is you already have this conclusion that God exists. That's already in your minds. And then you have all of this empirical data, empirical evidence that aligns with that conclusion. It is consistent with the conclusion. Like, nothing comes from nothing. Oh, well, there you go. See, God must have created the universe. Or you look around and things look designed. Well, look, see, that must be God. Whatever it may be, all of these, or even Reformed epistemology, that there's just natural conclusions you can draw that are just I forget, normative conclusions. I forget what it's called. Geisler talks about it. Do you remember what they are? What it's called? I can't remember the word. I think it's normative conclusions. Whatever it may be.
Yeah, I've never gone down that road. So
if you guys are, I don't know what I said. Sorry about that. I was meant to click comics. And anyway, so that was a second.
Back.
Yep, we're back. Welcome back again, everybody, to the Deconversionists. Anyway, so yes, you have all these pieces of evidence.
Now, just as a side note, like, they do work. Like, you can be convinced by these things if you are a rational person. There, with one caveat, you have to completely ignore the counter arguments and the counterfactuals. So, like, if I was trying to be reasonable and I didn't know the counter arguments and I just looked at what the Christian has to offer, like, I could be totally carried away with all that stuff and come to a God because it's a panacea. Like, everything is explained by Christian theology because, like you mentioned, God in the Matrix. Like, once you enter the Matrix, like, anything's possible. It's like simulation theory. Like, every single thing can be explained, or it can be just explained away by, well, God did it. God is all powerful. We don't have to know exactly how he did it. So you can get there. You just have to completely ignore the counter arguments that debunk every one of these things.
Well,
and that's what Christians are doing. Like, they're rational to an extent because they are accepting. Of course, maybe they believe first, so they're not rational, but they're being as rational as their faith will allow them. Well, but they're ignoring everything that the world has to say as a debunking mechanism to these arguments.
Well, it's more than it's not that it's irrational that a God might fit all of the data, because a God could be the answer, which is why, as an atheist, I don't sit around, or even an agnostic, I don't sit around saying, I know God doesn't exist. There's no such thing as God. It's impossible for God. I'm leaning that way because I don't see any good reason to conclude one does. But if I'm being honest, I can't just make that leap that a God definitely doesn't exist any more than somebody can or should make the leap that a God does exist based upon the evidence that we have. The problem is the evidence is inconclusive. The evidence we have only takes us so far, and it doesn't allow us to draw a conclusion yet. It allows us only to say, wow, this is all very interesting, but to be honest, we don't know. Like, that's the only conclusion we can honestly draw at this point. So the theist, in order for them to say, oh, look at all the evidence, it points to God. No, all the evidence might point to God. That is significantly different. So you have to have already drawn the conclusion in order for you to say something like, all the evidence definitely points to God, because the fact is, it doesn't. It aligns with the theory that God exists. It's consistent with it, but it's also consistent with the flying spaghetti monster. And that's the problem. There's no conclusive evidence to point to any one thing yet. or even that the universe had to have a cause. We just don't know.
You're giving counter arguments immediately, and my point was, if you just ignore those counter arguments, then the Christian arguments look perfectly rational.
I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess your point is taken. I guess the only thing I'm saying is we shouldn't need counter arguments. It's absurd that a conclusion has been drawn that a God exists, is the only point I'm making. The counter arguments are unnecessary. It's absurd that we are even trying to having to persuade people not to believe something they have no good reason to draw a conclusion to believe. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but logic and rationality are very tricky, and everybody thinks they're being rational at all times.
Well, that's true.
Or they would stop doing what they're doing, and they would try to be more rational.
That's true.
And you have to put in a lot of work to understand how you are suffering from a bias or committing a logical fallacy. And most people just don't know how to do that, because I think if you just asked a random person on the street, what is the definition of a logical fallacy? I don't think they would have any clue at all. But they believe themselves to be perfectly rational, and then they'll give you reasons for believing things. They just don't understand because they haven't been presented with counterfactuals.
Right. Well, the bottom line is, when you're brainwashed, it doesn't make you irrational. It just makes you believe things that you have been taught to question. Right.
And when you actually present them with the counter arguments, then you have a new problem. And it's not them being irrational, it's their defense mechanisms. And I think that the automatic psychological defense mechanisms are probably the largest thing keeping Christians within the faith. They're the biggest hurdle to get past. They get activated automatically, and you cannot deactivate them because they're there for it as a survival mechanism. So you have an impossible task ahead of you if you're trying to break through with counter arguments. So it's like a couple different levels you're dealing with. The first level is just they're ignorant of their position because they've never encountered counter arguments. And then the second level is when you actually hit them with them, they lock down. And if we could figure out how to get past that lockdown, then our task would be very easy. All we have to do is present counter arguments. They would realize they're wrong, and then they would stop believing. But that is the trick.
Alternatively, another method of approach, this is the one I like to use with the Unravelation method, is to help them see that they're using faith, help them to get them to stop using faith even for a moment, and they'll realize that they have no good reasons to actually believe what they believe, because if you're using faith, I define faith as a method of drawing conclusions without sufficient justification. So if you don't use faith to draw your conclusion, you'll realize that the gap you're closing with faith can no longer be closed, because the only thing closing that gap is faith. So without faith, you're like, oh shit, I don't have any good reason to leap over here. That's that both work, both take time. Unfortunately, neither one of them seems to be the clincher that just saves the day on the same day you talk to people. It's a process either way you go. So I've chosen to take the Unravelation method.
Right.
To
get them to, in your process, to get them to admit that faith is a bad path to truth, you are going to have to fight them on every single argument until they abandon them all and just fall back on faith itself. And then you can target faith. So
no, I don't think so. No, I think you just attack faith. Like without faith, all the arguments just instantly fall because they're all reliant on faith.
I don't agree, but maybe we should.
No, we've had this conversation, but what's that?
Maybe we should save our disagreement on that one for another time, because I can't.
Yes, we go round and round about this one, but I am convinced that faith is the actual root problem of
I just don't think they'll recognize that. If you go straight for faith, I think they will counter you with evidence and arguments that they've been,
Yes, I don't think removing faith is a rational discussion. It's not something you debate them out of. That's why I think the only way to do it is through a process of unravelation, which is why I called it that, which is what I do in my book. So no, I don't think if someone comes on here and I persuade them to using faith that they'll instantly be like, oh, because faith is actually instilled by brainwashing, by indoctrination. So you have to undo all of that brainwashing to get them down to where they're vulnerable and they lose that need for faith. Like, that is an absolute process it's a process that took time to build. So it's going to be a process. It's going to take time to remove. So yes, if you're going to just go for the instant kill, it's not going to happen by removing faith.
I think that recently, in the last couple decades, there's been a trend away from faith. Like, I think Christianity understands that the traditional definition of faith is a problem, the one that you're using, and so they have tried to distance themselves from that and redefine faith. So when you run into these people who have redefined faith and they're deep into apologetics, like, you're not going to be able to show them the error of their ways by debunking faith as a bad path to truth.
Well, I think they've tried to redefine it, but I don't think they've done it successfully. Like, to me, I don't think it's hard to get them back on track where they are trapped into the original definition of faith. Like, I think you're right. They have noticed that there's a problem with the method the way I define faith, because that's the way Hebrews 11:1 defines faith, and that's how Christians typically use it. So they see that's wrong because it's absurd to use faith to draw a conclusion. So they try to redefine it and make it sound like, no, it's confidence and evidence and all this and that. But after you get them to a point where they realize, what confidence itself, even if you define faith as confidence, even confidence is not a reliable method for determining truth. Confidence is not a method at all for determining truth. That makes no sense. But people use it as a method, and they don't even realize they're using it as a method because they think that that's a better definition of faith. So you can do it, but again, it takes some unraveling. It takes some time to get their minds removed from this idea that faith is a virtue, and that is not easy, because if you think faith is a virtue, you're going to hold on to that with all your might, and you'll twist and turn and redefine it in every which way you can to try to make it sensical. Because Let's face it, like, if you had evidence, if you had empirical evidence, you wouldn't need faith for the conclusion. It's just unnecessary.
Right.
So faith is absolutely different from evidence, no matter how much they try to equate them. So it takes some time to get them to see that, but it can be done. And in my opinion, that's the primary and best way to get the whole religion to just dissolve in somebody's mind and get them to leave the faith. At least that's the way it worked for me, unbeknownst to me at the time. But as I look back on my life, I realized that was what was happening. But
yeah, the way I like to put it, which works for your method, is if I need to get from 0 to 100. 100 is I believe the gospel. I'm a Christian. How am I going to get there? How am I going to bridge that gap? Because I got to fill in that percentage. So if I fill this part all the way up to like maybe 90% with evidence and arguments that I believe are solid evidence and arguments, and now I just have to bridge that last 10%, because I can't know for sure there's a God, even with all this evidence and arguments. So that last 10%, I got to use faith. So I make that last jump with faith. Now, if I then go through and I debunk every one of these evidence and arguments with counter arguments and show that these are all terrible things that you shouldn't be standing on. Now I'm all the way down here again. Now I have to bridge 100% with faith. Like, then can you do it? Is it reasonable? Of course it's not. Like, you have to bridge the gap at least part way before you can make the faith jump. So just knock down everything they're standing on, and now you got to go from 0 to 100. And I don't think anybody can logically do that.
But see, I think that's exactly.
You can do that with Christianity. You can do 0 to 100 with any other religion.
But I think that's exactly what Christianity does. I think that's what every religion does.
But they believe these are good things they're standing on. So
I know they do. I know they do. But here's the problem. The problem is it's not those arguments that put them in faith in the first place. Those arguments were added later to solidify something they already believed. Apologetics does not convince someone to be a Christian. It just supports a belief you already have. So when you already have that faith, and I've actually seen this happen tons of times. I've watched so many of these call-in shows. I listen to them like daily as I drive around. And it is amazing to me to see how some of the best atheists debunk every one of the arguments that these Christians bring, and they bring their best ones. And they're like, by the end of it, they're like, have nothing to say. There's like no evidence whatsoever. And their conclusion is, well, I still believe God exists.
Right.
Because for them, it isn't about 0 to 100 or 9 to 100 or 50 to 100. It doesn't matter because all the evidence in the world was never the reason they believed to begin with.
Well, that's why they went from 0 to 100. They need to be shown that, though. They have to be shown that everything they're standing on is garbage, and they're having to go from 0 to 100, a complete leap of faith.
Sure, but I don't think, again, from what I've observed, the Christian who has not unraveled at all yet in their faith, no matter how many of the arguments you remove, they're still going to think there's arguments there. You just haven't looked at them yet. You just haven't seen them. We just haven't dealt with them. I know they're there. Right. They're in the Bible. We just haven't seen them. So you can bring them back down to 0, but in their mind, they're not at 0. In their mind, they still have all the evidence in the world because it isn't the evidence that convinced them anyway. It's faith. Faith is all that matters. And so once you are there, you can debunk every argument I give you. And at the end of the day, I'm still going to be like, oh, I guess I just didn't think of the right argument.
But that itself, what you just said, is a counter argument. So either way you cut it, you're going to have to be making a counter argument.
Who is?
You are. We are. To reason with them, to show them that. Like everything you just said is in itself an argument, a counter argument to their brainwashing.
Well, I mean, in my opinion, what I'm trying to do with the Unravelation method is I just bypass all of the other arguments and the counter arguments that bring them down to 0. To me, that's inconsequential. There are none. I know there's none. I think they know there's none. I don't think it matters. Like, logic isn't the reason they're a Christian. Literally, it's faith. So for me, I don't see the need, and for me, it's not worth the effort and time to debunk all their arguments. I mean, I do it because it's fun, but at the end of the day, if I'm really trying to deconvert somebody, it isn't going to be by debunking their arguments. It's literally going to be by helping them to realize that faith is a method of drawing conclusions without sufficient justification, getting them to stop using faith as a method of drawing conclusions without sufficient justification. And that in itself will be all that is necessary because none of those arguments, because then that backs them away from even that 10%. And now they see clearly like, oh shit, what am I doing? None of this proves that God exists, which is where I was when I left Christianity. I was a presuppositionalist. I could have made all the best arguments for the existence of God. And after in that moment where I left faith, I was still a presuppositionalist, but I realized in that moment, I was like, oh, that argument doesn't work anymore because it doesn't actually get me to God. It just gets me to something. And that was enough for me to realize, oh, well, I guess faith was what was doing it. So all I'm saying is yes, we can spend all the time debunking all the arguments and with counter arguments. But at the end of the day, they're just going to hold on because faith is what keeps them there. So to me, I'm just bypassing that, debunking faith as the issue, and that dissolves all the arguments altogether. So I don't know if that makes sense. That's where I'm at.
Well, it makes sense. My only question or contention with this is what percentage of Christians can be gotten to through Unravelation? I mean, do you put this at 100% of them are using faith just like this?
Oh, I believe. Well, yes. I mean, think about it, dude.
Okay, so that's where our disagreement is because I don't think it's 100%. So
think about it. What Christian is drawing a conclusion that God exists based strictly on empirical data?
Oh no. Well, no, they're not. They're not.
No, right.
I don't think any of them are. No, but
right.
They don't know that. That's the problem.
No, I know. I'm not saying they know that. I don't think brainwashed people know they're brainwashed. I don't think a single Christian realizes what they're doing.
But there are other methods. There are other methods besides faith that they have used to come to their beliefs. And for one of them, and I'm curious to see how you would address this. Most of the Christians that I talk to don't use the faith argument and don't use the evidence or arguments. They use the personal experience claim. They came to God through a personal experience. It was extremely powerful. They experienced it firsthand. They didn't need faith and they didn't need evidence. It was the third way of getting to the same conclusion. And for those people, it doesn't really matter how hard I hammer them with the method, like you're using faith and you shouldn't, it's a bad way to get to the truth. They're like, no, I experienced it. There's nothing you can say that will talk me out of something that I experienced. And I think they can be gotten to, but it takes a totally different process.
So I don't think that their experience is what made them believe that God exists. Their experience was the piece of evidence that solidified the faith that they already had in God. So when you already have a conclusion God exists, you have to have something that undergirds it, something that makes it real to you, because you get to a point, like when you first become a Christian, it's all fine and good. It's like, oh yeah, I believe, and it's all exciting. You know, you just have faith, and that's all that matters. But after a while, you start wondering, why am I believing this? Like, I'm praying, nobody's answering. You start to question, right? But you know that, like, but something inside you says, I know this is real. Obviously, I'm gonna look around you. Everybody else believes it, you know, because birds of a feather flock together. So you look for reasons to undergird it. For some people, like myself, who are more empirically minded, they look for good apologetic arguments, right? But there's a reason the Reformed epistemological argument came about. It's for the feelers. It's for those people who are looking for an experience to undergird their system that says the Holy Spirit speaks to you, the Holy Spirit works through you. Jesus said that if you do my works, that I'll be present with you, and you do a work, and then something happens that you forecast into the situation. Rick Welch, I don't know if you've seen all the debates Rick Welch and I did, but this is Rick Welch's exact problem, in my opinion. Like, he read a text in the Bible, he forecasted upon his life that if he does this task, just like Jesus said, if he does this, then that's going to happen. Well, that happened. And that was all he needed. For him, it's like, I know for sure God exists because A equaled B, even though A never equals B. But for him, A equaled B because that's what the text said. So there isn't any amount of convincing him that the experience was insufficient, because faith is what's driving him. When I ask him, Rick, do you think that there are other potential explanations for what happened in your experience? Or I forget, I think he prayed for something and then God gave the person a car or gave him the money to help somebody. I forget what the exact situation was. Something like that happened. And I hear these testimonies all the time. I did this happened, and I prayed, and I know it had to be God because, well, what else could it be, right? And I asked him, is there any other explanations? Oh, sure, it could be coincidence. Oh, sure, it could be energy. Oh, sure, lots of options. Well, why do you think it's God? I just have to believe it. He doesn't actually think the experience is what did it, because the experience, even in his mind, could be explained a lot of different ways. It's because he already had faith, and faith was solidified by the experience. So I'm still convinced that even trying to convince Rick that the experience could be explained any other way, that didn't work. And it won't work, because it's just the same as presenting an apologetic argument, except to a person who is a feeler. What you have to do is unravel faith in that person's mind so that they no longer use it. That's the task. And it's a hard task, but I think that's the task that bypasses all the argumentation.
So what would you say to somebody who went to prison and they had an experience, that salvation experience at their lowest point, and God changed their life, and you say, well, you had to use faith first to get to that experience, and they counter with, no, I didn't think it would work. Like, I said the prayer, but I didn't think it would work because I thought it was silly, but I told the chaplain that I would do it anyway, and oh my God, I was shocked at the results. They just happened to me. So that person is going to claim they didn't use faith first. The experience came first, because they like to play that skeptic card where, oh, I didn't think it was real until it happened to me. And then what would you say to that first?
Well, I'm not sure that I'd be able to convince that person in one conversation. Again, it would take me a process of removing faith, which is what I do in my book. And that's why I wrote the book, because I knew that it was going to be a process that you have to take someone through. It's a very methodical and long process that it takes, because you got to do it layer by layer. And it can be done live, but it takes a lot of conversations, which is why I like to do that on my Unraveler channel, have long conversations instead of just one debate. But the thing is that I know, even if they don't see it, that they already believe God exists. If they didn't, then they wouldn't have concluded from one experience that it had to just be God. Because people who use rational mind and empirical data those two in conjunction with one another, their first conclusion when something weird happens isn't, well, it must be a flying spaghetti monster, right? They also don't say it must be a god, or they don't even say it must be something supernatural. The only time you jump to that conclusion is if it's already embedded in you, when you're already convinced that there is something called the supernatural. If you'd have never heard of the supernatural, I can guarantee you would never have even thought that in your mind for any experience that happened.
I would say that they could still get there even without the faith aspect, because they're primed to by whoever is leading them through this. Because it often happens in these types of groups where it's a chaplain or it's AA, but they're always like in a place where they're ready to try anything. And so they try it, they're primed to it because their mentor has said, this is going to be God. And perhaps these people just don't understand like basic processes of epistemology. So they come to that conclusion immediately. And then they hold the conclusion for so long that when you finally come and inform them that this is the wrong way to judge an experience, they aren't going to accept it because they're dug in.
That's correct.
But there was no faith ever required.
No, but you see that is faith. Like that's precisely what faith is. Faith, again, let me restate my definition. Faith is drawing a conclusion it's a method of drawing conclusions without sufficient justification. So they've already drawn a conclusion. That conclusion is embedded in them for whatever reason. They were brainwashed to think that. They were indoctrinated to think it. They were forecast that this was going to be the case. They were prepared for it, as you were saying. It's already what they're thinking. That's why when people get together in a gathering and like people start speaking in tongues, it's the Holy Spirit. Why? Because everybody in the room says it's the Holy Spirit. If you go someplace else that the Holy Spirit's never been heard of, that's not what their conclusion is going to be. It's going to be whatever. It's magic from Harry Potter, like whatever.
Do you think faith is synonymous with delusion?
No.
It's synonymous with brainwashing.
Yes and no. I think it's very, very intimately tied to brainwashing, but they're not strictly identical. So brainwashing is the cause of faith. So they're not strictly identical. So you can end faith by removing the brainwashing. So they're intimately tied together in such a way that it's almost impossible to separate them. So in that way, I can say they're synonymous, but they're not strictly identical ideas. So
like my hypothesis that I'm working on is that, well, I've told you this before, these levels of belief. Like I have a true belief, like on an absolute true level, that I am here having a conversation with you through a webcam. That is as factual as I can get. It is a true belief. But when I start getting into things that are more abstract concepts, like, I don't know, quantum physics or simulation theory or gods, suddenly these things only really exist up here. And if I claim to believe them, they're not on the same level of belief as I believe I'm having a communication with you. It's more of it's an abstract concept. It can suffer from delusions very easily. And because of that, my hypothesis is that these people know deep down that they're wrong when it comes to these faith beliefs. So I use that personal experience scenario because I talked to somebody who that had happened to them. They were in prison and they had that conversion experience. And what kind of worked on them, like in real time, is I asked them for details on what exactly happened what exactly did you feel when you had that experience. And I said to him, I found that when people speak it out loud, it kind of loses its power and it doesn't seem very miraculous anymore. And you kind of can be a little ashamed and embarrassed by what you're saying, because it's easy to say this experience was extremely powerful if you kind of keep it to yourself. But once you actually explain what was powerful about it, it loses the power. And I said, I want to try this. I want you to just say it out loud what exactly happened. And he wouldn't do it. And instead he said, wow, you're pretty good at this. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of found a weak spot, didn't I? Like, deep down, you kind of know this is a weak link and you might be wrong. Your experience doesn't hold up under real scrutiny. So I don't know how that plays into faith, but like if it's delusion, like they know it's wrong. So if faith is synonymous with delusion, then I think these people using faith already know this is a bad method.
Right. Yeah, I'm not. And while you may be right, I'm not yet convinced that that's the case. I don't think that they're delusional. I think there are beliefs that Christianity causes in people that I would call delusional, and when they believe them, so like as an example, I think there are people like Rick Welch who, in my opinion, is a stellar guy. Love the dude, one of the best people you'll ever meet. Kind-hearted, caring, would never own a slave, would never stone his wife, would never do anything of that sort. Right? Would never. He would even advocate for human rights. Like, he's just one of the best people I ever meet. But because he's indoctrinated with this faith thing, he has to defend the Bible at all costs. And so he has to say silly things like, well, if I was living at that time, I would have to, stone my wife. And
and when they do that, when they say those silly things, like they know on a certain level, they know that they're wrong.
Right. I think they do, but I don't they have to find a way to justify their faith, because it isn't about the arguments anymore. It's about realizing, like, I'm not sure, because like even when I was a Christian, and it's hard to think back because when you're out, you're out. But when I was a Christian, I got to say, like, I was just as convinced as Rick is. Like, I would have presented the same stupid arguments. Like, I would have. I'm not a delusional person. I'm a very nice person. I would abhor all those things. Now, it's possible I never really saw them for what they were because nobody presented them to me, so I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, that's
how I would have handled it. But I'd like to think that I dealt with them in my life, because I was a pretty deep studier, man. Like, I went really deep into the text. I mean, exegetical teaching. Like, I'm pretty sure I encountered just about every text there was, and I'm sure I had an answer. But if I didn't, maybe that would have got me out sooner. I don't know, but I think the point I'm making is I really believe this stuff. So if that's how you're defining delusional, then I guess they are the same. But I guess when I think of somebody who's delusional, I think it's somebody who is like incapable of thinking correctly. And I'm not sure that a Christian is incapable of thinking correctly. I just think the reason they're incapable in that moment is because they're trapped by faith. It isn't a problem with their mind. It's almost like the presupposition argument.
Maybe they're capable of it, but they refuse to do it.
I don't even know if refuse is the problem.
Like that would be delusional.
Yeah, I don't even think it's refusing, because if they were refusing, yes, but I don't.
Yeah, I do honestly think that they are refusing. So, for example, I talked to my sister about a week ago, and it's very frustrating for me because, like, all family always is, and of course, when you're the only atheist of an entire Christian family, it's going to make for a real hot time. And my sister thinks that she's going through the trials of Job. She's had a lot of medical issues over the last few years and a nasty breakup. And she thinks that God is testing her faith. But at the same time, she is begging God for help. And she's been begging God for help with these problems for several years now. And she doesn't understand why God's allowing her to suffer so much. And so I confronted her with it last week. And I'm like, how long are you going to beg God for an answer and not get one and keep believing that he still cares about you? And her retort was, I will never stop. And like, I'm not going to even talk about it anymore with you. And like, I got so pissed off because she can think rationally. Like, I know this is a fact. She's refusing to do so. And she's so trapped in a spiral of delusion that no matter what God does to her or refuses to grant her requests, she will never, like a stubbornness, she will never doubt. I'm like, holy shit, there's something wrong with you. There's something legitimately wrong with your brain. Your brain is broken. Like, you are literally delusional because you are not a stupid person, and you are trapped in this loop of I will never doubt. Like, God could kill me. Like, God could do anything to me. I will never doubt. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? So there is a level, I'm convinced, a level of whatever you want to call it, self-delusion or just delusion, where they are just they're refusing to think correctly.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't say that there is nobody at all that fits that category. I'm sure there are lots that are in that place, but probably for fear of admitting that their whole life was a sham, and like everything you believed was wrong, and now you have to rebuild this entire worldview from scratch. Like, that's scary for a lot of people.
Yeah, it takes a really strong person to do that.
It does. It's not easy. Like, in a way, I was really glad that my life fell apart before I became an atheist, because I don't know what I would have done. It's hard for me to say. Like, I like to think I'm a strong person and I follow the truth wherever it leads. I mean, I always did before then. Which is why I kept losing jobs in my churches, because I kept believing new things and had to plant my own church. So I was always that guy. But boy,
we got out somehow. I would like to think that all I had needed while I was a Christian was somebody like myself to come around and shock me out of my self-imposed delusion. And if they could have done that, like, maybe I would have been susceptible to it. Maybe I needed to get a ways down the road again. Maybe it wouldn't have happened until I got exactly where I was. That's the unfortunate thing, is we can't run that simulation.
The problem is brainwashing runs deep, dude. Like, it's when something is drilled in you to a degree where it becomes part of your identity, it's really hard to separate that from who you are. No matter how much the arguments against it make sense, it's like, if I go that direction, I'm no longer me. Like, that's a scary place. That's a scary thought. So if I'm really me, then I can't hear that. That's just not an option. I can't go there. And I think that's what happened. That's why in even those who escape faith, strictly faith, and they get out of the religion itself, and they're no longer a Christian, they become an atheist by all intents and purposes. It still takes a lot of time for them to break free of so much of the indoctrination that they held as Christians, like, in regards to human rights, things like that, where, that's still evil. You can't be gay. That those gay people, that's just immoral. And you're like, when you're actually thinking straight outside of, you're like, why? like now I'm just like, what was I thinking? Like, it just didn't make any sense. Like, but that indoctrination runs deep even after you leave the faith. So I think, just observing that and seeing how long it takes for people, even who have deconverted, to get their head straight in so many things that they've been indoctrinated with. Like, I feel so sorry for Christians. I do.
It happened to me the opposite way around. The way I explain it, I might explain it in my book. I don't remember if I do or not, but it was an interesting deconstruction, because for most people that I have known, former Christians, they will leave the faith first, and then they will change all of their views that surround religion. Like, they'll if they're on the right, they'll go left, and they'll change their views on gays and all that stuff. For me, it happened the other way around. Every one of the strongly held positions I had on social and political issues fell apart first. It was like a castle being assaulted. Like, every tower one by one came down, every wall came down, and the only thing left at the end was the keep, Christianity, which was keeping it all together. It was the only one that hadn't fallen, and because I had seen everything else that I had believed unravel and become untrue, like, the only one I had left was to point my finger at was Christianity. And I'm like, why am I making a special exception for this? If I can be wrong about that, and that, why am I correct about this? Why is this sacred? Like, I'm committing the logical fallacy of special pleading. Like, everything else in the world can be totally wrong. I can be wrong about everything, but I can't be wrong about this. And as soon as I turned the scrutiny on that, then it fell apart too. So it kind of was the opposite.
Got it. So one thing I would say, as I was saying a few minutes ago, like, I feel deep sadness for Christians, because I know that it's all because of indoctrination. It's all because of brainwashing. Like, that's where it begins. I don't think anybody logicizes themselves into faith. I don't think they look at all the evidence and say, well, this is so logical. There's no other possible conclusion but God. I don't think anybody does that.
No, I agree.
That's real. So it saddens me to know that there are people in this world like me that grew up in this and were trapped in it, and 42 years of your life, of all the experiences you could have had in this world, you're, for all intents and purposes, your youthfulness is gone. Like, that sucks ass. You know that same experience. We talked a little bit about this last week. So it's very, very sad, and it's very, very painful. And contrary to what Christians think, that we're just trying to hurt people because we're angry at God and hate God and just want to destroy religion, it's quite the opposite. It's because we care deeply about your life. And I don't want you to have to be 42 years old before you wake up. I would love to help you get free at 20 so you can actually enjoy your life, or if all you have left is, when you're 80, at least you have 10, 20 years left that you can enjoy. Like, it's just
right.
So so it really, there's a lot of motivation here for me knowing what I've gone through. So jumping off of that, let's get to our topic a little bit. Can we grieve a God who never existed? So back to my story.
Can you answer simply? Like, do you think you can grieve a God that never existed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Because in your mind it was a real person. It was an invisible friend. And I know that's something that you can psychologically do. You can definitely grieve an invisible friend when they die in your mind or whatever. I know kids that have grieved because of Santa Claus wasn't real. Yeah. So it's a real painful thing. So you can absolutely grieve a God who never existed. And unfortunately, that grief is deep, and it's powerful, and it's painful, and it takes a long time to get through. Largely because, even though, as I said, getting out of it was just easy. To me, it was like the snap of a finger. It was that moment, and I was just done. Like, it didn't take a lot of convincing. It was just this aha moment. What am I doing? I'm an atheist. Done. Easy peasy, right? And that's what I think will happen. And once you unravel the faith in anybody's life, that they were brainwashed to have. Like, if you can do that successfully, which I've really worked hard to achieve in my book, if you can do that successfully, you'll just wake up, and that part's easy. Taking a step out of that prison cell, though, that the door is now swung open, taking a step out of that into this world that you know nothing about, that's very, very scary, because now you're walking out there without this God that has always had you in the palm of his hand. He was always there for you, no matter what. When you prayed, even though he never really did anything for you, you thought he did. And for me, and especially for me, like, I was of the Reformed ilk in Christianity, where the Calvinist Reformed ilk, where I believed God was sovereign over everything, like to the degree of what color socks I put on in the morning, because that would have an impact on maybe evangelism. If I'm walking down the street, if I have red socks on, someone who likes blue socks might not say hi to me. So then, so everything was definitely sovereignly ordained. And so I lived this life where it didn't really matter what happens. I was able to get through it because I knew that God was working all things out for the good of those who loved him, right? And they're called according to his purpose. I knew he had some mighty plan for me, and he had it, he had it all worked out. So even when I screwed up, even when I sinned, after the fact, I was able to be like, well, that was ordained by God too. So clearly he's going to work all this out for my good. And so I lived like that. So, I mean, it was just like I had this rock under me every day of my life. And I really lived like that. So, from time to time, I would, lack faith a little bit and get stressed or, worry about stuff. But for the most part, I was a pretty steady, strong guy. When things go wrong, I was just like, hey, we got this. No big deal. God will provide, Man, leaving that's scary, dude, especially when you are taught your whole life and then continue to feed it to yourself through your own doctrine, especially me as a Calvinist Reformed, that you don't have the capacity to do that for yourself. You're worthless. You're a sinner. You can't do this. You need Jesus, because without him, but for the grace of God, there go I, right? So I'd be an utterly useless piece of manure without Jesus. So here I am taking my first step into the world without Jesus, and I'm like empty inside. I didn't know what to feel. I was scary as all get out. And man, was I grieving that God. You know, there were so many times I wanted to pray again, but I was like, that's all I know. But I also knew that was pointless now. So, boy, that was tough. So yeah, I grieved. I had a lot of grief, I cycled through the 5 stages of grief. You know, anger was probably the one I came back to the most often, because man, was I pissed when I found out all this was wrong. You know, and had to rebuild my life from scratch. Man, was I frustrated. So yeah, that's kind of my story in a nutshell. You know, and then we could talk more about it, but I want to give you a chance to grab the mic.
Well, you know, I was going to take issue with the term grieve until you mentioned the 5 stages, and then I can get on board with it, because I have grieved things like for real, and I know what that feels like. Leaving Christianity did not feel like grief for me in the way that I would have expected, I guess. I wasn't necessarily sad about it. I wasn't sad to have lost an invisible friend, because it goes back to that delusion thing. I think deep down I knew that it wasn't true on a certain level. Like a child with an invisible friend, like they know that they're not telling the truth. They know this isn't real. Can they really grieve something that never existed? I don't think so. If you know it's not true, because for one thing, that child can simply bring their visible friend back anytime they want, because it's a conjuration of their own imagination. So no, if I'm being honest, I didn't grieve the friend in the clouds that I lost, but I was angry and depressed and scared and all those other things that you mentioned. So yeah, but it was for a very specific reason. It was because I was afraid of the future without a God in control. Like before, when I believed that God was here, he had the entire universe under control, and nothing outside of certain parameters was going to happen. Once I became convinced that he didn't exist, then suddenly everything that was possible became a possibility. There was no longer any guardrails, no longer any limits. Like anything could happen to me, because God is not on my side. Like he's not there looking out for me in the end. He does not have my best interests at heart, because he does not exist. Therefore, anything can happen to me or to the world. And that was a very scary thing to accept. So I guess you could label that grief if you're going through the 5 or 7 stages. I just didn't feel grief in the same way that I did like when my dad died. Very different. Like my dad was a real person. I knew him personally. The God was a figment of my imagination. He never talked back. Him simply going away didn't really mean anything to me necessarily. The anger came from the fact that I was lied to. Very angry that I was lied to. And I understand that the people that were lying were telling lies, not necessarily lying. Lying means that you know you're telling a lie. Simply telling a lie just means you're repeating something that's not true, whether you believe it or not. I know those people were simply telling lies, not necessarily lying with the guilt aspect, but I was still pissed. And I like to say, because I don't believe in free will, I understand that they didn't have the free will to know any better, but that also means I don't have the free will to forgive them for it. So it all balances out. So I was pretty pissed. So I went through the anger and I went through the depression. So yeah, I guess I did grieve a God that never existed.
Sure. If you think of it in the 5 stages of grief format, then yeah, I think everybody does to some degree or another. You know, I even went through the bargaining stage. You know, I can tell you, like, another element that was really hard for me that I grieved was feeling like I was super intelligent and knew things. Like, well, as a Christian, as a pastor especially, man, I knew my shit. I could run circles around people theologically, man. I was a great preacher. I was being invited to conferences. I mean, I did not need to know science, because all of that was just a waste of brain space. We know God created the universe. All this evolution garbage, we don't need that. That's just, I don't know what they're making up there or what the people are getting paid to make up, right? just knew I was right. And I had such a strong knowledge of things. And when I would talk, I would have people be like, whoa, so many big words, man. How do you know so much? Right. And then I leave Christianity. I'm like, the hell? I don't know anything. I like literally know nothing, man. I'm so frustrated because all I knew was the Christian worldview. And I knew that well. But once you step outside of it and you're no longer in it, you're like, well, all of that was useless. I have a bunch of this wasted brain stuff now that I don't even use. Sure. And it's one of the things I get to do in these shows is I actually get to sometimes once in a while sound smart because I can talk Bible. But like, even then, it's been so long since I've studied it. I forgot so much of that now I even look stupid doing that half the time. So it's like I'm in this no man's land trying to rebuild a life where I'm trying to educate myself to know reality because I just shut my mind off to it. Boy, so I definitely miss being ignorant, and ignorance being bliss. And here I am now, and I'm like, wow, man, there's so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way I explain it in my book is that it's like being trapped inside of a log cabin, and the real world is outside and it's huge. And every once in a while you might peek out the curtain and you don't like what you see and you think that it's wrong. And so you stay inside this log cabin, and that's your entire world. Like everything that you know about the world is there, and it's the truth. Like that is the universe. And leaving Christianity is like opening the door to that log cabin and walking out, and all of a sudden the entire world, the entire forest just opens up all around you. And you suddenly realize that like everything out there was real and far bigger than anything that you had inside. Yep. And you have to relearn reality itself, because this four walls is no longer your universe. Now the real universe is your universe. And it's like being reborn, which is ironic because Christians claim that, they're born again as a new man,
right? But
they don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
Right.
Being reborn as a new man is leaving religion, because you don't know, up to that point, you can claim, I'm a new man in Christ. Oh, the old man is behind me. But did you really experience that? Or was Christianity all you ever knew? And you just had this delusion that you had become a changed person at some point. Like, you were a teenager that snuck out at night, maybe had a beer on the weekend, right. God forbid premarital sex or something. And then you get saved, and you're like, that evil me, that old man I'm leaving behind. I was such a bad person.
Right.
You have no idea what being reborn means until you have left a religion in adulthood, and you have realized, you've had the shock value of realizing that reality in its truest form is now for the first time available to you.
Yeah. That's like people, that's one of the hardest things about talking to people who have genuine, real, like massive conversion testimonies, where they, like Mike Mayano, you saw that debate where he was in jail, and then he finds Jesus. Like, that's dramatic. So yeah, people like that, it's really hard to convince that, what do you mean by reborn? To them, they were reborn. They can totally have this massive life change. But by and large, you're right. It's not typical. Most of the time, it's just, you grew up in church and you just use this verse because it sounds pretty. Yeah, no, for sure. Well, if you're watching, we will encourage you to call in, whether you're a theist or an atheist, doesn't matter. We would love you to call in. And yes, I typically just use those two because you're either A or non-A. A lot of people don't like to be called an atheist when they leave theism. But if you're not convinced there is a God, you are by definition an atheist. So it's not easy to swallow when you've thought that this was a bad word your whole life. But hey, the faster people embrace it, the faster we can move on with our lives.
You can be a non-Christian theist. That work. Maybe that's a middle ground for you.
You'd still be a theist, though.
Right. But we have this maybe false dichotomy most of the time that you're either a Christian or an atheist. But you can believe in a God and not be a Christian. I mean, we'll partially accept you.
That's true. You can be a theist and not be a Christian. That is true. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but then you're just basically a theist.
Yeah, and then you'll have to explain everything about your God. And
right.
If it fits the Christian God, then why are you not a Christian? So it gets tricky quick.
Yeah. There was something I was gonna say as you were talking, and it's slipped my mind, unfortunately. I wish I could remember it. Anyway, so yeah, learning things, that's a big deal. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. The Eastern Orthodox position, they're one of the most difficult to debate with, because
when you speak of the devil and he shows up, do you really want to invite Eastern Orthodox to suddenly crash the stream by summoning them through magic words?
Well, I don't mind talking to them any, like, I know you don't like talking to them, but I don't mind, again, because to me, I bypass all the arguments and go right to faith. I think that's the real root of the issue. So for the Eastern Orthodox, to tie into your log cabin analogy, they had the three legs to the stool: scripture, tradition, and the church, right? And so those are the three legs of the stool. And so it provides a great foundation for that stool. The problem is it provides a great foundation for only that stool. And so when you're already in the log cabin, so to speak, in on that stool, these three legs are the only thing you're using in life. And you filter everything through those three legs, because that's what faith does. You're convinced God exists because, well, look, these three legs support that. So again, it's just an apologetic argument that supports what you already believe. It definitely requires faith to close that gap, no matter whether you have 3 legs or 10 legs. It's all the same thing. So they have those legs. So yes, that's one of the reasons why it's hard to debate with them, because if you're going to argue about the Christian worldview, well, it supports the Christian worldview very well, and probably the best version of Christianity, if you're going to argue which version would stand out the most, because they've got the most history on their side, they've got the church on their side, they've got scripture on their side. So it's like, okay, they probably have a pretty solid argument that they're the most realistic and best version of Christianity. Now, if you're just using scriptura, sola scriptura, then I would argue the full preterism, whatever. But if you're going to argue Christianity in general, they have the most oomph behind them, if you will. But the problem is, when you're using those three legs to filter everything, if reality exists outside that log cabin, as you're saying, you can't see it. You can't understand anything outside there, because you're filtering what's out there through these three legs.
Well, the three legs presents a problem, because we had the one guy on, I think I asked him, if we took away one of the legs, would the stool fall over? And he said yes, and it didn't matter which one. -1, it's gone. So they have 3 weak points instead of just one. Like, if you are only sola scriptura, you only have one leg. So it doesn't seem as stable, but we're not dealing with the laws of physics here. 3 means 3 targets, and it's far easier to take down one of those 3 than it is to take down the single one. I mean, I have a better chance at removing one than I have concentrating on just one.
Sure,
if that makes sense.
Sure. To me, the 3-legged argument is no different than the cumulative apologetic. Like, it's the same thing as piling a bunch of arguments that have no weight to them and then saying they have weight. Like, all of them amount to 0, but if you put them all together, 5 or 7 or 10 times 0 is still 0. So what cumulative apologetics does is it like, this is what William Lane Craig.
Well, it can't be cumulative, because if it was cumulative, I could reduce it by 1 and it would still stand. This one is like a trinity. Like, all 3 have to be there. So it gives you 3. One of those 3 is going to be weaker than the other 2. So if you could take it down, the whole stool falls over. So it actually makes Eastern Orthodox the least stable denomination, is what I'm saying.
So you're saying a denomination has only 1 leg is more stable than 3 legs?
More stable because one stronger leg, you don't have so if I have 3, like, one of them is going to be a weak link. It's going to fall easy. The more you add, the more likely the more complicated something gets, the more likely it is to be unstable. And if your support system demands all of them to function at all times, losing one makes you a weaker, more complex being. Like, it's a house of cards, versus if I just have one, you can only attack that one. It's more stable in a way. All I have to do is take out one of the three legs of the Eastern Orthodox theology, and the whole thing falls over.
Yeah.
It's a more complicated organism, meaning it's less stable.
Yeah, the challenge with Eastern Orthodoxy, though, is that when you attack the one, they immediately jump to the next. It's like a merry-go-round. You can't just say, okay, well,
being honest, because he told us that one goes, it all falls over.
Well, yes, but that's why they can't stay on one. Like, if you say, well, let's just talk about one, you can't do that. Like, as soon as you start talking, they'll jump to another one, and they'll jump to the other one, like, because they all reinforce each other. So there's never an opportunity in talking to an Eastern Orthodox person. There's no chance of just talking about one. They won't let you, because when there's no answer in Scripture, that leg doesn't fall because, well, let's jump to this leg. The church tells us the answer to that, and we just trust the church. And history tells us the church is right. So this verse must have an explanation.
So you end up basically talking to a presuppositionalist
who's exactly right,
wrong, and that's why I just don't talk to them. I don't want to talk to an Eastern Orthodox Christian. I agree 100%, which is why
exactly
what they're going to bring, and I'm not interested.
I agree 100%, which is why I don't actually feel the need to talk about the three legs at all. I bypass that altogether and go straight to faith.
Well, it was telling that when we asked one of the Eastern Orthodox guys we've had on, we asked him, if I removed one of those, would you still be a Christian? He's like, no, I wouldn't. It would fall over. I'm like, okay, well, then you're living in a house of cards. Right. I only have to take out one. Like, you're a less stable entity.
Right. But again, the problem there lies that their faith says all three of them are supporting each other, and none of them can be taken down. So it sounds nice to say, well, if one goes, then all of it goes. But you can't take just one down. It's impossible, because you just jump to the other one. One answers any of the problems the other one has. So you're absolutely right that it's useless to talk about that with them. You can't get anywhere, because they would just presuppose that their three legs are right. But that's what I was saying, though, is like, if you just focus on what their three legs support, then all you have is support for the Christian worldview. If reality exists outside the Christian worldview, then those three legs are useless to what is taking place outside that log cabin, as you said. And unfortunately, you can't examine what's taking place in reality, because it's being filtered through what's taking place in your worldview. And it's impossible to have this discussion, which is why I understand why you don't like having it. And typically having it on a forum like this doesn't typically go very far, because you only have so much time. And you're right. It's next to impossible to get somebody to where I want to get them in one show. So I totally understand. What's that?
I'll give them credit on this. It has forced me to come up with or create more complex arguments to counter what they bring. So there has been a positive aspect to it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So anyway, I'm hoping that somebody will call in tonight. If not, then I guess we're going to end here pretty soon. Maybe give it a few more minutes. But we'd love to talk to somebody tonight. I was kind of hoping to. Whether you're a theist or an atheist, it would be nice to talk to somebody and just discuss whether or not, or anything we're discussing tonight. We kind of gone all over the place, but can you grieve a God who never existed? Maybe you just want to share your story. We'd love to hear it. I shared mine. Elliott, you talked a little bit about yours. Yeah. About grieving. The grieving process was mostly anger for you. And I admit mostly anger for me too. And beyond just grieving the God, as I said earlier, it's grieving the whole life that you lost. Grieving the life that you didn't get to live. Now, granted, I'm not going to say my whole life was miserable. I had good times too. I mean, I had a decent life. I enjoyed many, many memories. So there was a lot of good things that happened too. But boy, if I could relive it, I certainly would make different decisions.
Yeah. And that often is directly hitched to your parents, because most of us, we had to get into our adulthood before we could break away, because we had that foundation that was formed early and often. And it prevented a lot of things from taking place. You don't really break free of your parents until you're like into adulthood, like a good ways. If you think about it, your first opportunity to leave is 18, and then you're an adult, and then usually you go to college, but you still have this strong link back home because you only just left. So by the time your good years are over, where you could have been living a different life outside of religion, you're almost certainly still a Christian that entire time, because you haven't distanced yourself enough from the very first support system. Unfortunately, most Christians then go on to get a secondary support system that keeps them in the faith for even longer. And that's why, Ellen, you didn't make it out till you were what, in your late 40s or 50s?
42 years old.
Okay. Yeah, and I didn't make it out till I was 35. So we got out deep into adulthood, and our opportunities for living a different life had greatly diminished. So we would need a time machine.
Yeah. Well, and I also, there was a lot of things that I can honestly say, like, if I wasn't indoctrinated and wasn't forced to go to church and use certain language and Christianese and be careful how I dressed and had all these rules put upon me about what a Christian does, I might have been a different person. Like, who knows what I could have become? The formidable years, I was completely and utterly taught who I was instead of becoming who I wanted to be. We got Kelly in the room. Kelly, welcome.
Hey, welcome to the show.
Hey, hi.
Hi, glad
Kelly.
to have you.
Hi, everybody. Hi, yeah.
Welcome.
I don't even know you folks' names. I'm so sorry. I can barely see you on my little screen here. But the gentleman there in the green, it was so funny. I accidentally dropped my phone, and all of a sudden this voice talks, and it was just when you were just talking about the deep grief and such. And I'm going, hey, wait a minute. So I've only been listening to you for a few minutes. So
that's all right. We're glad to have you. Kelly, are you a theist or an atheist?
I am an atheist, but it's very, very difficult for me to say that. And it feels like I'm lying when I say it. I still am at a place where I will not make this big statement about denying the Holy Spirit and all this stuff. So, I just want to be honest with, just really not sure what I'd be classified as, but I call myself an atheist, kind of, but it's so uncomfortable to say that.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I was raised in a culture where atheism was like this evil word, like you can't be an atheist, right? So I get that. Yeah, I totally understand not wanting to declare yourself any. And I mean, even though you are an atheist or a theist, as I said earlier, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to walk around declaring yourself to be anything. You don't have to do anything. You have every right to just keep it to yourself and be who you want. So,
boy, not where I live. It was so weird. I hear you, and there will come a time when you're right, but I haven't learned how to present myself subtly in a way where it isn't an issue. Where I live, everybody's constantly praising the Lord just in conversations. I'll sit down at a table, and the last place I just got pushed out of about 2 months ago, the ladies ganged up when I finally just had enough, and so I left that environment, and I'm starting over again now. And so I'm sure that's all very normal. But in addition to that, I'm experiencing just horrible, horrible grief. I was chatting about it down in the chat. So yeah, it's, and I don't think I'll ever get over it, because the Bible and Jesus were my best friends and basically my only friends, as far as, besides me, just always there. So yeah, it was a real big deal, but it happened real quick.
Well, I can totally sympathize.
Just a couple minutes.
I can totally sympathize with your situation of not wanting necessarily people to know. So I myself live in a very rural area where everyone around me is a Christian. And if I announce in any way that I no longer believe or that I'm an atheist, like, I will be a marked man for sure. And I've already suffered some consequences of that, not by telling people that I'm an atheist, but simply not being receptive to things like people talking about prayer. Like, I had a woman tell me 3 times in 5 minutes that she was praying, or that I needed to pray or something. And I finally said something to her. I said, "What are you trying to do here? You've mentioned prayer 3 times." And me simply questioning her like that, she hasn't talked to me since. And this is a small town of 200. So those have consequences. So I totally understand that you want to keep it, undercover for as long as possible, because it will bring consequences.
And so I blew that. You were right. And I've always been kind of a straight shooter, and now and I'm not saying that's good. It's my lack of emotional maturity at being able to just keep that to myself. But I can work on that, and you are right.
It's very hard to keep it to ourselves, because it's an important piece of who we are, especially if we used to be Christians. And like you said, Jesus was your best friend. Like, it's so hard to not say anything now, if when you were a Christian, it was impossible to not say anything about being a Christian. So, who you are didn't change. So you still have that need to talk about what's important.
Well,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, especially as you were saying, you don't have a lot of friends, you said, and Jesus was your friend, the Bible was your friend. So now you lost that, and it's easy to want to latch on to people and want to tell somebody because you just need a friend. And I get that. That's tough. I remember, I was very strategic about coming out as an atheist. I knew in the moment, but I didn't walk around. I didn't walk back to the house and be like, "Mom and Dad, I'm an atheist." Like, that wouldn't have gone over well at all. So I waited a couple of years. In fact, it took my friend Jen Fishburne to convince me to come out and actually, start talking to the world again. So that was, I maybe would still be underground if not for that. But yeah, finding friends, because that was my hardest thing. That was one of the hard things for me too, is who do I talk to about this? It was very hard. And I was lucky enough to encounter a couple of close friends that I hadn't talked to in years, that just by feeling out testing the waters, she kind of was like, "Wait a second, are you an atheist too?" "You are?" "Oh," it was like one of those things. But, I don't know what your situation is, if you've had opportunities to encounter anybody that you shared commonality with now.
Actually, I went to our first local atheist meeting this last weekend, and
Nice.
Yeah, it didn't go well. I mispronounced, I'm even afraid to say it, Kamala's name wrong. And I have a speech impediment, and it didn't go well. And because I'm a hermit, I got scared because we were in a small room, and I got up and left. And I know that sounds so ridiculous, but there are reasons for it. I have agoraphobia. Is that what it's called when you're afraid to go outside?
Yep.
Anyway, so I'll try it again. We'll try it again. But yeah, and I do have friends. It's just that I've lived in my own apartment for so long. But I just don't know how to relate to people in real life. However, I do have all my studio equipment ready to go. And as soon as I find a safe place, I'm going to rent that office and set it all up. It's all ready to go. And heck, I'll just make some friends online. I do have friends online, and I also have friends here. It's just, it's been a long time since I've been out in public very much.
Well,
Just
it's a great start, you coming on here tonight.
Oh yeah. Well, this is just, this is just, I mean, no, don't get me wrong. I'm grateful and honored to be here. But well, maybe it is a little brave. I don't know. I don't want to make a fool out of myself or anything, but I come from a communications background, so it doesn't this is much easier for me than to deal with people in the real world. So,
well, if it's any consolation, a lot of us, this is our only way that we can interact with people
yes.
of like mind, obviously. I mean, you're surrounded with Christians. I'm surrounded with Christians. I could easily, have Christian friends, but to find people like us, the only way a lot of us are going to do that is by doing it in this context like this. And it's unfortunate, but it'll have to do. And that's okay.
Well, I'll tell you, it's funny. Elliott's one of my closest friends, and we've never actually met in person. I just met him online. So
really, that's so cool. That gives me
it's my fault for living
satisfying.
in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
I had to drive 1,000 miles
neat.
to meet
I
my
love
other
hearing that.
online friend one time.
Oh. Well, I'm willing when the time is right to meet folks, but we're all just really people, and we have our lives and our stuff, and so do I. Everything hasn't lined up yet so that I can visit one of these nice, like something in Houston or whatever. That'd be really cool. Just or just go to someplace far away from where I am and go to one of their atheist conventions or something. We have something neat here in the Pacific Northwest. We have a UFO off the mark a little bit, but nevertheless, I'll bet you if I actually made it one time, I'd meet some really cool people there.
Definitely.
Yeah. Being that I've seen one, that's what kept me going for probably an additional 5 years on believing that, in the Lord. Is the experience was so fantastic. I would never expect anybody to believe me or to be able to relay it to anybody in a way, but it kept me going for a long time, that there was something else. And so I saw something. A lot of people do, that's just part of
Elliott, is it
go ahead.
Is it Kelly's signal that's going in and out, or is it me?
You seem to be okay. She was going in and out for a while, but she's good now.
Oh, she is okay.
Am I good now?
Yeah, you're good now.
Now you're good.
That was the aliens. They cut out my signal so that
there you go.
Oh no, she's talking about us again. No, I'm kidding.
Even though I'm a skeptic, I don't question the UFO sightings, because there are so many of them, and we now have a lot of footage of something happening. So, I'll absolutely believe that people are seeing something. I can't say what it is, but it's definitely something unusual and not identifiable. Literally a UFO. So I have no problem believing that.
I'm just grateful I don't feel like this big pressure anymore to get out my one scratchy little video and proclaim to the world before I die that I had this experience, because like you said, it's all out there. It's like, oh, good. It's like, it's not my job, and the videos are so vague anyway that, I wouldn't believe a video. I wouldn't believe any of that, no matter how good it was, unless I experienced something for myself. And not only that, what's the word when you have an internal experience and that's the only way you can perceive the world is through your own mind? How we all
if you're locked in, but that's a medical condition.
No. That's not what I mean at all. I'm not expressing myself well. Scratch all that, okay? Sometimes I babble. I haven't learned how to debate well yet, or consolidate my thoughts. So
join the rest of us.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that you didn't communicate it well. I'm just not sure what word describes that.
Oh, it's such a simple word too. It's one in philosophy. It's where you experience
solipsism.
brain in a vat. What's that?
Solipsism.
Brain
Is that
in
what
a
you're talking
vat.
about? Solipsism, yeah.
Just where you where you know
Hard
where
solipsism.
Christians call in.
No, nothing.
What was that again?
It's called hard solipsism.
Where people. Oh, okay, yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Solipsism.
So
yeah.
anyway, yeah. All together now. Solipsism.
I'm not sure if you're like behind us or in front of us.
Yeah, I think I think her internet might be slightly more unstable than ours.
Yeah. We're going
Well,
in and
you know
out.
what? Can you hear me okay?
This moment, yes.
Most of the time.
If it's probably this darn cable here, and that's why I need to get my earphones and everything. Sorry, guys, I'll do better next time, okay?
That's okay.
Yeah, you're fine. Kelly, tell how long were you a Christian?
Well, I started reading the Bible when I was maybe 4, but I don't mean reading it like an adult. I meant my mother, holding open a scripture and telling me what it said and having me sound out the words. So started out Jehovah's Witnesses in the Florida Everglades swamps, and then went on to Southern Baptist out there, and then just had that strong influence. And I've just been a Bible student my whole life. I've had a rough life like everybody else, as I've gone through my life. And just often the Bible was my only friend, like my teddy bear, right?
Sure.
I still, I don't now, but up to several months ago, I must have had, 5 or 6 Bibles all over my home. Constantly, I still have the family Bible, my study Bible with all the special marked places, the yellow highlight. Oh, yeah. So my whole life, basically.
So how long ago did you get out of Christianity?
Well, and I guess I stopped calling myself a Christian during I'm struggling for words. Please be patient with me, please. Since the genocides, I don't know what is appropriate for your channel, so I don't know what I can say. But our recent
say anything
genocides, okay, our recent genocides over in the Middle East just were the final straw with me in that. And then how Christianity was then associated with politics, and that we are over there with some sort of mixture of Christianity and politics. Even if, say, let's suppose for a minute that the whole story of the Trinity is true, I would want to rename it all at this point, because I want no association with the word Christianity, because it has now been ruined, and it needs to stay that way. And it's very hard for me to say I'm no longer a Christian, but I want nothing to do with genocide, and that is my bottom line. There is one thing that Kelly does not approve of in this day and age as we evolve, is genocide. It's totally unnecessary. And since the word Christianity is now being used politically to hijack this idea of it's cool to genocide people, no, I'm done. Big changes, and Republican, and I am, excuse me, meaning of the word Republican, and I'm going to be a part of demolishing the word Christianity in for any games anymore. I have a hard time playing. I go to these, sometimes I'll call into a talk show and everybody's joking and keeping things cool. And I have a really hard time doing that, so it just cut me off if I get too serious or whatever. But you'll notice that with me is I'll be la la la, everybody's joking, and it's so weird to do that.
Curious question. So you said you don't want to be associated with Christianity. You wish you could, but because of the genocide, you can't. So that was what made you stop being a Christian or calling yourself a Christian. When did you stop being a theist? When did you stop believing in God, that a God exists?
Yeah, it happened so quick. I think it only happened, it happened in like 30 seconds. And I was spending last winter waiting for surgery. No, I just had the surgery, but I was very unwell. No. Years ago now. I can't quite remember. Anyway, I was waiting for surgery, and can you guys hear me okay? Did I go away?
Not really, no. Your internet is awful bad right now. We're not really hearing much at all.
All right, we're going to have to bump her, unfortunately.
Yeah. Kelly, if you can still hear us.
Okay, that's fine.
We're going to have to let you go tonight. But we encourage you to call back next week. Perhaps you'll have a more solid connection. We do have somebody waiting to get in the studio with us, and we do want to take him before we end. So thank you so much for calling. And we hope to see you again.
Yeah, we'll talk again. Call in. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
All right. Yosef, welcome back to the Deconversionists, man. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. We had you on last week. We sent you off to think about some things. And so I'm looking forward to hearing what you concluded and what you came up with. Here's what I'm going to suggest, though. Like, it is 7:38. We have been on for about an hour and 38 minutes. So we're going to try to limit this call to about 22 minutes, if that's good. So we can like get out of here at 8 o'clock.
So his mic is not connected. I've tried to unmute his mic, and it will not unmute. Okay, now I think you're good.
He had it muted, and your volume's still not on the mic. Yeah, there you go.
You're good. All right.
There you go. So we're gonna do our best to end this around 8, regardless of where we're at, because we talk to you frequently, and we'll have you back in. If it goes a little longer, fine. But we're gonna try. I want to try and round it out for both our sakes and the audience listening in. So
sure.
All right.
Yeah, we got approximately 20 minutes.
Yep. All right, Yosef, go for it, man. What you got?
Let's see.
Did you come up with a method?
I did. Well,
Sweet.
Well, it's what I think, generally speaking, the world perceives as evidence, physical evidence, intellectual evidence, not the emotional or subjective experiences that I spoke about before, which is evidence, but it's not sufficient enough evidence for people who obviously haven't had that same experience as I had. This is pretty much universal. So me going to what I'm about to say next, I already know that it's still not going to be sufficient evidence. There's never going to be enough evidence that would make you say, oh, logically that makes sense. Now I believe in God. Because ultimately, it's the emotional. It's an emotional disconnect that would prevent someone from having evidence that's right in front of your face and denying that evidence thereof. So it's going to happen. I'm pretty much prepared for it.
Well, before you say it though, I just want to ask you one question: is it evidence? Would you categorize it as evidence if God Himself came down and appeared to me? Because that is something that I would accept. Or do you think I would still have an emotional block in the way, and I'd say, "You're not God"?
That is great. I was thinking about that. I said I was going to ask you that question, and the fact that you beat me to it is interesting. I don't know. I'm not you. So I can't say whether or not you would deny him if he was to come and throw a baseball in your face and say, "Look at me, I'm here. I'm God."
You did already say that we wouldn't accept any amount of evidence. So I'm wondering is that evidence? Because if it is evidence, then you're saying we wouldn't accept that.
That's not physical. That's not the evidence I was going to tackle. That's more of like a metaphysical what if scenario. But even if that were to happen to you, it would still be subjective. It wouldn't be an objective experience unless he did that with everybody across the board, where he appeared personally and said, throw a baseball in everyone's face and said, "Here I am," to where you can't deny it. So I wasn't even going to touch that except maybe towards the end. But that was a great question because I was thinking, I was like, I wonder.
Because I would accept that.
I don't know.
Like, it's one of the few things that I would accept. I've been waiting for a God to show up. And until he does so, almost any kind of evidence for his existence is going to be very difficult to believe because he's just not present. And if all he's got to do is show up, put an end to all this, why would he hide and give me evidence instead? Like, that's why evidence is so hard to accept, because God's never here. It's as if someone is writing me secret love letters, but they never ever show up. I have no idea who they're from or if there even is a real person behind them. And if this goes on forever, and that's the only thing I have are these letters, I have very, very little reason to believe that this person exists in the way they claim that they do until they actually knock on the door. And if God would just knock on the door, I wouldn't have to debate things like, I don't know, intelligent design.
Well, and even further, like, even if God did knock on the door and show up, I would still need him to convince me that he's actually a God and that he's supernatural. Because just because somebody shows up at your door and says they're God, I mean, okay. So whatever this God is, he would have to be able to demonstrate that he's God. So because this claim of the supernatural is a big claim. I mean, it's quite extraordinary. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So because it's so extraordinary, it would seem that it would require something far more than just, well, I had an experience that I think is God.
Well, I tell you what, Ellen, if I had been one of the apostles and everything in the scripture, in the gospels that it claimed happened, actually happened, and I was one of them who witnessed it firsthand, I would accept that as 100% verification. I wouldn't be a skeptic about it. I'd say Jesus is obviously real, has these powers, and I'll take his word for it that he's God.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would or not. It's hard to say, because the most difficult one would be the resurrection. But since I wasn't, none of the apostles were present to watch him rise, so there could be many explanations as to how that happened.
I wouldn't go that far. See, there is a point where you can be too skeptical, I think.
Maybe.
And if I was one of Jesus' apostles and I was with him his whole life, he said all these things, did all these things. I saw it, verified it for myself. He did walk on water. He did all these miracles constantly. And then the Romans took him away and they sentenced him to death. I don't have to be there for the crucifixion, but they took him away. He's dead. Everybody said it. He was nailed to a cross. I knew for a fact nobody gets off a cross when they get nailed to it. And then 3 days later, just like he said, here he is with the hands and feet being pierced. I would just accept it. At that point, I would say, okay, I have sufficient evidence.
Well, I would have sufficient. In theory, that would be sufficient evidence that he rose from the dead, but not sufficient evidence that a supernatural being exists. Like each one of these claims, each one of these things that took place, they have their own they have to have their own explanation behind them. Like, just because Jesus walked on water still doesn't verify that something supernatural exists. It just means he walked on water. And how do we know that he didn't find a way to do that naturally? Magicians do stuff like that all the time. But even if he did it for real, that still doesn't mean supernatural. That still doesn't mean a God exists.
Okay. We can probably debate that at another time.
Sure.
I'll give it back to Joseph.
Well, tonight's our debate night, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joseph, we're back. Go ahead. It's back to you.
I mean, I know, I love it. It just shows that even amongst atheists, they have disagreements, whether slight, whether large. Same thing with Christians. You have Protestants, you have Baptists, you have Catholics, and they have different variations of what it means to be a Christian, let alone what it means that a God exists. So this is not a monolith, and I think it's fascinating. I will say that I find that y'all back and forth banter about your disagreements can be more civil than my experiences amongst Christians who have different beliefs in their faith, in their sects of Christianity. I will give you that. It's much more of an intellectual experience as opposed to ad hominem attacks on people, assassination of their character, where you're going to hell, but I'm going to heaven. That type of deal. That's not happening between you two from the time that I've heard you speak over the last few weeks in the background. So that's definitely a big plus, a big positive. Something that I noticed completely different from the other side of the spectrum.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that.
All right.
So let's get to your method then. Unless Elliott had another question to.
All right. Well,
I
got
did tell you that I would give you an interpretation of your dream from last week.
Oh yeah, you did.
You had the dream, and then enough of it came true in enough of a way that it convinced you that it was supernatural.
Yes.
Okay. So my conclusion would be that I have heard enough of stories exactly like this that you might think that it was unusual to the point where it was supernatural, but enough of these happen and enough people believe them to be unique that it seems like it's a very common occurrence, because people dream every night, all the time, and then they live their lives, and so often their lives sync up with something from their dreams just by sheer luck. So you're going to have situations just like yours repeating themselves probably thousands of times a day, where they dream something and then part of that dream came true enough that they thought that it was a supernatural experience or foreshadowing. But it happens so often that it's not unique, it's not novel, and it's not a miracle, because a miracle by definition is something that breaks the mold, does something that it shouldn't do, something very unusual. But these scenarios are so normal just by the sheer volume that they can't be miracles. So, I mean, it just by the sheer probabilities, at some point in your life, you would have a dream and something would happen afterwards that would look like the dream.
That's a pragmatic way of looking at it. And you're right. I'm not the only person on this earth. Obviously, there are billions of more people, and they all have dreams, and they all had situations similar to mine where it's unexplainable. So you say, well, because it happens so often, it's so common. Therefore, it's not this magical or mythical thing. I believe it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be as normal as nature itself. The issue is that a lot of times we ignore it. These dreams that we have, we say, "Oh, that was weird," that happened, and you just kind of brush it off and go about your life. But every so often, we take notice of something that is so abnormal. That one dream being the case for me, amongst many, that it's like I can't even ignore this subjective experience. But it's interesting how my subjective experience is also magnified amongst the billions of people on this earth. They have similar subjective experiences. Now, whether or not they accept it for what it is, or they write it off as coincidence, they can write it off as luck. They can write it off, in my case, as, well, it might be something more than luck and coincidence. Maybe there's a spiritual element to it. Maybe it's God. And then some people are just kind of like, So it just depends on how the person perceives what that is. That doesn't diminish what it is. as oh, this is so commonplace, is nothing. It's kind of like if I look at a baby being born, that happens all the time. But that doesn't mean it means nothing. It just means it's commonplace. But it's still something about it's something miraculous about it, even though it happens everywhere all the time with everybody, well, all women, but not all women, but most women.
Okay. Let's reverse it. Let's reverse it for a second. Instead of it being common, let's make it rare. Do you think that it is a miracle or it is supernatural to win the lottery?
Ooh.
Not that a specific person will win the lottery, but that someone will win the lottery. Is that a miracle?
It can be a combination of some would say fate. It could be a combination of some would say intention, law of attraction. Someone wants it enough, badly enough, can attract it. But who's to say people who also want it badly enough, they don't attract it?
Yeah, but a lot of people win the lottery and they just bought a lottery ticket on a whim and they got lucky. I mean, they didn't attract it because a lot of people are trying to do the law of attraction and they are consistently failing. My point is that when you have so many people buy lottery tickets, it's the law of large numbers. Somebody is almost guaranteed to win. So it's like a logical thing that should happen. And when you apply that to dreams, so many people are having dreams all over the world that it logically follows that someone will have a dream and then the events of the dream will take place the next day. It's just the raw probabilities. It's like winning the lottery, but winning the lottery wasn't a miracle and neither is the dream that came true because so many people are buying lottery tickets and so many people are dreaming.
Lose. That's true. And so many dreams don't have any meaning beyond that was weird, that was kooky, moving on. It doesn't, most of my dreams don't have that element of whoa, I didn't expect this to happen. The majority, 95% of them don't. So it's easy to cherry pick the 5 or the few handful that's like, that was way out of the ordinary. So you're right in that most people I know have dreams and they're rather uneventful. But the ones that are eventful tend to be extremely so, to the point where it's like, out of all these dreams I had that meant nothing, this one was like, okay, hey, maybe it was a lottery. But sometimes it gets to a certain point where certain things line up where it's like, I don't know.
I bought a lot of scratch offs. I bought a lot of scratch offs, and most of them don't do anything. But every once in a while, one will hit. So that's the dream. That's my hypothesis. You just got lucky, man.
Joseph, do you think that what a person believes about the supernatural affects their interpretation of events like dreams and winning the lottery?
It can. It can absolutely. Their perception prior to that experience can shape how they then then go on to explain what happens according to the best way they can.
Right. So do you think,
depends on the person.
So do you think that in interpreting events like this, that the best way to interpret them is through the filter of what we already believe? Or is it better to set the belief aside as best as possible as far as filtering is concerned and just look at the raw data and the evidence of what took place and just interpret that for what it is? And if you don't have an answer because you're unsure, to just say, well, I'm unsure, I don't have a good explanation, rather than whichever filter you have ahead of time. Because like I could say, well, Joseph, your dream, it's definitely not supernatural. But the reason I would say that is only because I'm filtering it through my natural lens, because I don't believe the supernatural exists. That would be an incorrect way to interpret your dream. Rather than just assuming it's not, even though I do assume it's not. If I'm going to be genuinely honest about interpreting your dream and what took place, I would need you to explain what was happening that day, what happened the day before, specifics about the dream, looking at how, professionals that study people who dream, interpret dreams and explain how they work. I would want to look at all the things that are actually taking place and evaluate just that data and make a decision upon that rather than using my preconceived idea to automatically say, well, that definitely wasn't supernatural. Because if I do that, then I'll have no chance of ever experiencing the supernatural if it does exist. So like I was saying earlier, if God showed up at my door, the reason I'd want him to, demonstrate all this other stuff is because I definitely want to have genuine evidence. I don't want to just be like, oh my goodness, something random happened, I believe. Like, that's not a good reason to believe. So I need more than that. So I'm asking, like, if we were to just evaluate your dream without either of our worldviews coming into this, either of our views about the supernatural coming into this, what do you think we would conclude? Like, let's do it. Let's just do that test. Why don't you tell us the events that took place surrounding your dream, specifically what the dream was about, and what you learned about from, because you were going to go study that too, what people said about dreams. So let's evaluate all this, and let's see if this is an isolated event that we just can't explain, or if it's testable that you can go back and do it again to see if it happens a second time. These are all the kinds of things that I would want to do when I'm evaluating something and trying to come to a genuine conclusion. So do you understand what I'm saying? Is that making sense?
I do. It's like you're building your own kind of evidence, your own scientific hypothesis, and you're not just assuming that it could be one thing or the other, that it could not be God, or it could be God, or something in between. You're trying to, as much as you possibly can, divorce your personal bias, which everyone has a bias to something, as best as you can, so you can get down to the truth, as opposed to what you want to be the truth that may not be the truth.
Right. And one of the best ways to do that, probably the only way in my estimation, at least currently, to be able to isolate your view from it, or your preconceived notion from it, is to find a way to falsify whatever it is you're testing, whatever the claim is, whatever it is that happened. Like when science makes is trying to put together a proposition, they make a statement and say, okay, well, if such and such happens, then that's pretty good evidence that my hypothesis is true. But then before you make it a theory, you gotta retest it over and over again. You got to find ways to falsify it to show whether or not it can be disproven. And if it can be disproven, then you put away that proposition and you come up with a new one. So same type of thing here, as you evaluate the dream, and then we have to have whatever the conclusion is that we're drawing. We're saying, if this were to happen again, this would be what would be necessary in order for it to be a god, or in order for it to be a spirit, or something like that. And then you'd have to have a way to falsify that. So I don't know if I'm making sense, but to me, this is the type of rigorous testing you have to do if, in fact, you're making a proposition that it was the supernatural. Because, again, that's an extraordinary claim. It's huge. So there's got to be more to it than just, well, I just had a good experience, and this was so unique, and I couldn't explain it any other way, so it was a unicorn. That would be the same way of drawing a conclusion for me. Like, you might as well just call it a unicorn. Like, how did you determine it was something to do with God? So I'm asking if we can evaluate this on a grounds level basis to see what conclusion we would actually draw from it before we just assume it's God. Help us understand.
I think he has to eventually call it a unicorn, because I believe this is an unfalsifiable scenario, because he would have to have the exact same dream, which we know is unlikely or impossible. And then he'd have to wait and see if he had the same thing play out in real life again. And if he can't do that, it's an unfalsifiable proposition. You do have to call it a unicorn and just sort of move on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's probably true. That's probably true, Joseph. So you're calling it God. I'm calling it a unicorn. I mean, either way, Elliott's right. I mean, you'd have to find a way to duplicate the process, do it again more than once in order to be able to test it and verify that your proposition that it's God or the Holy Spirit is actual. So I'm not sure that, and we talked about Occam's razor last week. I'm not sure that the most simplest and obvious conclusion is that it was something extraordinary, like a supernatural being, as opposed to it, just as Elliott was explaining earlier, just being a dream. But I'd like you to convince us that it was the Holy Spirit. So that's what I'm asking for. How are you going to convince us? Because I know you said that nothing you say will convince us, but here's the thing. If it convinced you, it should convince us. If it can't convince us, then why would it convince you?
It's a good question. I would say I've had these questions that you've asked about the dream. It wasn't like I had it and then I went and told the guy. Like I said, I was skeptical myself, more so than you were, because it's my dream. So it's kind of like, what the hell? I don't know this person. That's weird. It's like walking up to somebody and giving them $100 bill. And it's like, where the hell this come from? I don't know. I'm just supposed to give it to you. That's kind of what it felt like. And I'm like, that is still, even though I know it's a gift in a way, it wasn't asked for. And I didn't ask for it. So for me, the way that I knew it was legit was the person who I gave the message to, who I told the dream that it was referring to about. So for him, it was like, oh, wow. So he confirmed for me. It wasn't me confirming prior to me giving it to him, like, oh, this got to be God. And it was, this is weird. Okay, this is what happened. What's going on? And then he just went, yeah, I cannot believe you're like, this is weird. Like, we was praying with my wife and all this other stuff. We're moving. I said, whoa. Okay, he just dumping everything on me that he was going through that I could not have possibly known. So for me, his reaction and his feedback is what helped me go, okay, I'm not crazy. Okay, this is more than just coincidence, because it's so specific that, you know what, Elliott, you could be right. It could just been right place, right time, right dream, right moment. Everything just perfectly line up, the sequence of events. But when I reflect on it, it's still years impossible. Impossible. That's how little contact I have with this man.
Hang on, Yusuf. One second. Did you just say it's possible that Elliott could be right?
I said it could be, but based on what I gave the guy, for him, it was from God, because he was praying about these things. He was doing spiritual things.
I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but since we're running out of time, I need to ask you, if it's possible that Elliott can be right, then you can't say it's only possible that it was something supernatural, right?
Well, let me put if I were to tell Elliott the same dream and it was about him, he would come to the conclusion that he gave me, right? Whereas the guy who's very spiritual, he's in the church, the guy I don't know, but I know he loves the drums and playing for God, he gave me his perception of how he perceived the dream to be. So even if I were to do it with Elliott in the same way and I guessed it perfectly right, he would still say, oh, cool, that was an interesting coincidence. And
but I'm stuck on this. You said it's possible that Elliott could be right. I'm not saying Elliott is right. I'm saying it's possible that Elliott could be right, and you agree with that. If Elliott might be right, then you haven't actually done sufficient legwork to justify your conclusion, because you haven't eliminated the possibility that Elliott's view might be right. That's what falsification is. You have to eliminate Elliott's possibility before you draw a conclusion, and you haven't done that yet.
Well, I can't eliminate that. Again, if I was to give him the same dream, but it was referring to him, but then it's not possible that he's right.
Well, no, I'll tell you why that wouldn't work. For the same reason why dreams in general are not convincing to anyone but the person who has the dreams. You could come to me and say you had a dream, and then you could tell me something that will or has happened, and it will appear at first like it's miraculous. But the only thing that I have to verify that you actually had a dream, including the one that you have been talking about, is your word, because you're the only one who experienced it. And at the end of the day, even if I totally trust you and believe that you're not lying to me, I can never eliminate the possibility that it is just a tall tale. Like maybe you are making it up. That's always going to be a possibility, even if I don't believe that is what happened. And as long as that's a possibility, it's not good evidence for me. It might be good evidence for you because it happened to you, but dreams can never be good evidence to a third party, because they can never know if the person actually had the dream or if they're just making it up.
But it shouldn't be good enough. It shouldn't be sufficient evidence for you either, as long as there are other possible explanations that you haven't eliminated with actual testing.
Right, but he's using it as evidence for us. and I'm telling him why we don't accept it, I mean, he's free to.
Yes, I know. I'm not. I know. We already know it's not enough for us because we'd have to be able to test it. We'd have to verify it as a third party, and we can't do that because number one, we can't get
right. But he's presenting it to us as if it should be good evidence for us.
Oh, still. Well, here's the thing: if it actually was good evidence for you, I might actually believe it because you seem like a trustworthy person. But I don't think you've eliminated all the possibilities because, as you said a few minutes ago, Elliott's option is still on the table. It could be, even if you don't believe it is, it could be. And until you eliminate that as an option, that makes it impossible for Elliott's to be the case, then you really haven't done enough work to justify a conclusion. You have to eliminate all their possibilities before you draw your conclusion and say it's definitely this. It's like you've played the game Clue, right?
No, a long time.
Yeah, well, it's been a long time for me too. But do you remember doing those little check boxes and you're trying to narrow it down to who exactly was the killer, and you got these cards and you look at them one at a time? So you're eliminating things, whatever. And at the end of the day, like you're supposed to get down to where you literally only have one of like the tool they used to kill the weapon, the person, and the location in the house that they were in. And until you've narrowed it down all the way down to those three, you really don't know for sure that it's those three things. You're just guessing, even if you have a good hunch that it's probably Colonel Mustard with the wrench in the library. You're not sure it's the library yet because you haven't really eliminated that option. So the kitchen's still on the table, but you want to win so bad you'll take a guess that it's these three. Sometimes you get lucky and you won. Sometimes you find out, shit, it was the kitchen after all. Until you actually have eliminated all the other possibilities, you really don't know for certain that it was Colonel Mustard with the wrench in the library. You're doing the same thing here with your dream. You haven't eliminated all other possibilities to remain with only the one saying this has to be it because all other options are off the table. You got to eliminate them all, or else you're just guessing.
Wait a second. What gave me the conclusion was not me giving me the conclusion that this was a dream that was abnormal from God. I knew it was something different, but the only reason I got a conclusion was the same way that you would go to trial if you was someone was convicted for murder. They have witnesses on it. They bring witnesses to the stand. They might have very little evidence of themselves, like, oh, we weren't there, we didn't see it, so we have to rely on witnesses. My witness was the person who the dream was in reference to. It wasn't me, because I was skeptical all the way up to the point where I almost didn't tell him, because it was just like, it's insane. I don't know you, and I still got to go to church and see you next Sunday, and that's going to be awkward. So it's like a social thing, but I had to kind of get outside of my mind and say, okay, if it is real, and someone had this dream about me, it was such a beautiful. I would want someone to tell me that. So then I told him with a lot of trepidation, but I got the response that I didn't know what it was going to turn out to be. It was the witness was himself and his wife, and to me, that was enough to justify how they perceive it to be real. Now, if I was to tell Elliott the same dream and it was referenced to him, and it turned out to be spot on, exactly the same, how did you know that? Elliott can deduct for himself that this wasn't God at all. This was just a random situation. It was as random as someone winning a multi-million-dollar jackpot lottery. But it was true. But that's the way Elliott would perceive it.
There's a
so
key
depends
factor.
on who is perceiving the dream that I'm giving, regardless if it's true or not, which is why I went back to how I give you the evidence and the proof of anything will be filtered through your lens and how you currently perceive things. So for the religious guy, he's going to see it as God. And for Elliott,
right there.
Oh no, I have doubt.
Joseph,
but
right
it doesn't mean
there.
it's not true.
You mentioned God, and you mentioned God before being the one that gave the dream, and I think that is a key factor involved in this entire story. Because how do you know it was God that gave the dream and not another supernatural entity like a demon that gave the dream? Like, I don't think that you have a way to eliminate that as a possibility.
That's not easy. That's a very possibility, because I'm going to just be candid and say I'm very perceptive to things at night, and I hear what the knocking on the doors or the loud screams. Just the other day I had a dream about my sister, how she came, and I'm like, okay, only she would know I knew it wasn't random. Only she would know is most likely her. But I wouldn't say that was God. It was her. But then you say, well, how do you know it wasn't a demonic force, or was it a benevolent force, or malevolent force? I don't know until I do the work, which it requires a lot of prayer and fasting, because sometimes I can be deceived about my own spiritual nature.
Is perception and intuition a pathway to truth?
Yes, it can be.
Really?
But it takes work. It takes work.
So
people can be deceived by their
you think a person,
perceive things.
You think it's a healthy way that you can live your entire life literally just off intuition and you get everything right?
No, absolutely not. That would be foolish. That would be very naive.
But then it's not a pathway to truth.
It can be. It can be a pathway to truth. But
how do you determine when it is and when it isn't?
That is up to each individual person. Like I said, it's a person's relationship with God and how close they are. If they're distant, they can still get these dreams that could actually be nightmares or turn out to be so essentially what
you're saying is, when something happens and a person wants to interpret it a certain way, they get to just make that choice, and that's just truth because they decided they like that interpretation.
No, the truth has to be the truth. So it can be.
But how do you determine? But I asked you how you distinguish between when intuition is working accurately and when it's not, and you say, well, that's just up to the person.
Okay,
so the person just gets to decide when their intuition's working right.
The simple way that I'm able to determine it is, okay. This is going to be too simple of an answer, but it is the feelings of love that I get. It's like the Grieves or something. You have 1 level, 2 level, 3 level. If I'm at 1 level, but the dream itself might be here, I might not be able to understand it to if it's going to be a malevolent force or a benevolent force. I don't know yet. So that means I have to kind of raise my ability to feel love from God, to understand, is this from him or is it from some other spiritual, supernatural force that is not of him? Because they do exist. That's how you get, ghosts and the paranormal activity that people record, and these things. You can say they're not real, but the stuff is on videos, on camcorder. This is before AI, before CGI technology. There's a lot of stuff that is on camera that's like, oh, that's kind of odd. So
they were making movies back in the 1920s.
I know, Blair's Witch projects.
You can do pretty much anything at any point.
It can be that way.
Have you ever used your intuition, thought you were right, and were wrong?
We all have. I would be a liar if I said I didn't.
Well,
right. That's the
right. But the difference is, I'm not arguing that intuition is a pathway to truth, and you are. And so the problem is, you said it depends on the individual person, and you just said, I have used my intuition, and I thought I was right, and I was wrong. So how can that be a reliable pathway to truth if even when you think you're right, you can still be wrong?
How is that a reliable pathway to truth? Like, it depends on the person's, again, development and love, and the further away they are from love or the nature of God.
But no matter how much of that they have, they can think they're right and still be wrong.
No, the more you have, the more certain you are that you're right, and then you have elements of proof that okay, that was right. But it depends on each person's, again, where they are at on the love scale, 1 through 10. Some people are at 1, some people at 5, some people can be at 8. Some people say Jesus was at around the 8, 9, 10 area. So he was able to perceive a level of truth that most of humanity couldn't. Then you have all the levels down below, which is pretty much where we are at. So it's not easy, basically. I wish I could say that, I'm pretty sure this is right, and then it turns out right or it turns out wrong. I'm like, damn, I thought I was right.
So
but there are times where I'm like, I'm not so sure, and it's like, whoa, that was spot on.
Yeah. Okay. So again, it sounds to me like it's a 50-50 flip of the coin. Like, sometimes you're right and sometimes you're wrong, and there's no way to determine when it is, because even when you think you're right, sometimes you can be wrong, and you can be your most loving person in the world, and those moments things go really well. But what if you're having a bad day and you're not feeling very loving, and then you still think you're loving, and turns out you're wrong? Like,
It happens.
where, like, this doesn't sound reliable to me. This sounds like a lot of 50-50 guesswork. And my question, though, is if intuition is a pathway to truth, why do we need evidence for anything?
So, Joseph, I would recommend reading a book called Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow by a guy named Daniel Kahneman, because he breaks this down, what exactly intuition is and where it came from and how it can be used effectively. And the other type of thinking, the thinking slowly, that is not intuition, that it actually uses a rational process. Now, one of these thought patterns is for survival, for fast thinking. It's wrong most of the time it's wrong. And the thinking slowly is the rational process when you have time to actually reason things out with a rational process. So when you're engaged in intuition or fast thinking, most of the time you're going to be wrong, because that thought process is something that evolved to keep you safe in an environment that had a lot of dangers, where false positives didn't hurt you, but false negatives did. Meaning, if you're out in the bush and you hear something in the grass, and you always assume it's a predator, and you take action, you're going to save your ass every time, even if you're wrong 90% of the time. But if you assume that, if you're a skeptic and you assume it's just the wind, you're going to be right most of the time. But if you're wrong once, you're dead. So that's where intuition evolved from, the intuition that you're using to come to these conclusions. And that intuition is most of the time incorrect. It's just the way that you feel. And, I would recommend like looking into those two type 1 and type 2 thinking patterns or processes. And like, maybe that'll give you a better idea of like how better to judge things, rather than not second guessing your own feelings about it, but always second guessing your feelings. You're going to be wrong. You're going to be right a lot more if you dial down the intuition.
Yeah, and keep in mind, like, the point I was making is that intuition isn't a pathway to truth. It's often what you have to use to make a rash decision, because there's just no time to evaluate circumstances. So you do that because you need to, and sometimes you're right and sometimes you're wrong. But that's not an evaluation of truth. That's simply making a decision because it needs to be made. But when it comes to something like interpreting a dream, there's no rush for that. You don't need to use intuition for that. You can use data and evidence. But again, I mean, I'm curious to answer my question from earlier. Like, what is the point and usefulness of evidence if intuition can just be used to determine truth?
So the problem, I say intuition can be a pathway to truth for an individual, but it can be a pathway to truth for the collective, for the whole. It's not. That's still a subjective experience. So
but isn't truth is truth, right? Like, you can't have a truth that I can't have, right? If it's truth, then I don't need
finite.
But if you have a truth, there's no other thing out there that's the truth. Like, there's no my truth and your truth. Truth is truth. So if you're able to determine truth through intuition, well, I might as well just shut my brain off and just let you start telling me everything that's true. Because if you're able to discover it through intuition, man, I'm wasting a lot of my time putting effort into this thing.
Well, the thing is, at least when it comes to God, he speaks not audibly. It's not an audible thing, but it's more of it's an emotional heart thing. So it's not that it bypasses your brain. It uses your brain, but we can make the mistake of assuming that everything is completely intellectual and logical. There are some things that only you can understand if it comes from an emotional place. And then you say, well, that can be manipulated too. But so can the mind, as we know. The mind can be, but we assume that because we're so intellectual and we can speak so eloquently and we can invent things and come up with conclusions and theories and laws of everything. that we can't have flaws in that area too. We do. There's a lot of flaws in that, as much as it is with the emotional side of things. The issue is that we neglect a lot of the emotional part of ourselves in favor of the intellect, because it's much more readily accessible, in the sense that this just makes sense in the moment. This makes sense in the here and now. I can see this evidence with my own physical eyes. So therefore, I'm going to put precedence of my intellect over my emotion, over my spirit. So that's actually an issue across the board, even with people who claim to be very spiritual, very godly, very holy, and so on and so forth. So it's not just a black and white thing. But the book, I'm going to read Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. I do the best I can to, now, Elliott, I would never go as far as abandoning my intuition, because it has been proven right more times than even I'm like, oh, I'm glad I listened to that.
Well, you always,
that's interesting.
You always will need your intuition for survival, like, because you all day long you have to make snap decisions. So it's
you're talking about survival. I'm talking about something it's many things, but the one dream I spoke about, that wasn't a survival element. That was more like this feels like something more than my normal dreams. But that wasn't a survival element. That wasn't like do or die. I'm in the bush. I have to think fast. In fact, in that situation, like I explained, I thought very slowly before I even reached out to the guy, and I held my breath, and I'm like, oh, and he's like, boom, da 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 da. I can't believe. Okay, so it's enough for him that it's supernatural. That's good enough. Now, whether or not I believe it to be true, doesn't even matter.
You might change your mind after you look into it and research it.
Hey, I have an idea. Let's test your intuition right now.
Okay. I don't know how you do that.
You use your intuition and tell me, am I wearing orange pants right now?
So I'm not a psychic.
No, you don't have to be a psychic, because you're saying you don't need evidence because you have intuition. Intuition shouldn't need me to display to you what color pants I'm wearing. You should just have intuition.
Man, Alan, we're going to disagree again, because
that's not how that works.
Intuition is based on experience and clues. So he could actually come to that conclusion correctly if he is noticing context that maybe you're not aware of. But you're making him guess, like,
all right,
cold.
That's all right. We'll do a real one.
It's like
let's do a real one. Let's do one that's based on. Let's do one previous knowledge. What color is my coffee cup that I'm drinking out of?
I'm focused on you in the conversation. If I was to tell you what color your coffee cup is, am I paying attention to any one of you?
I take a drink like every 30 seconds, dude. Your intuition should be able to tell me what color my coffee cup is.
I'm focused on it. Well, but you also know that the human brain is such that we're limited and that we can only focus on one thing at a time. So I'm listening to you guys. I'm listening and focused very intently. But I now know it's blue, of course.
I was gonna say, can you...
But that's my limitation. As a human being, I can be observant of what I need to be observant of, but when I'm locked in on YouTube and what you're saying to me, so I can go back and listen and say, okay, they make some interesting points, and go back and think. The last thing I'm thinking about is, what color was Alan's coffee cup today? That's not.
But so in reality, most of the time, like when you have a dream, you're not previously thinking about it either. It's just something that takes place, and then after the fact, you're putting an interpretation on it. So for me to ask you what this was would be the equivalent to that.
It would be like throwing the coffee cup in my face, to where I'm forced to acknowledge it. That's what a dream like that would look like. It's like throwing it at me, and I'm going, whoa, I didn't see it before. Now I see it now. And so now I have to address it because I got a knot on my head. So I can't pretend it didn't happen. So let me see where I can go with this. Was it this? Was it that? Who knows? Now I'm going through the process of elimination. And if someone else gives me confirmation that this is true for them, then that's good. And there are some cases where I might have a dream that refers to just me, and I have to go through that same process of elimination that was just a silly dream, until I see evidence of that wasn't a silly dream, or it was a silly dream. It's like balancing a tightrope.
Joseph, what you're describing, you're not using intuition. You're just simply using a process that is not maybe the best process to use. Intuition is like when you come home from the store and you have an intuition that something is wrong, like there's an intruder in your house. You have experiences that have built up through your background that are cueing you in to something being wrong based on things that you're not observing it like consciously. Like maybe the door was ajar and your intuition picked up on it and warned you, or you've been through it's feelings based on experiences, or you're walking down the street and a guy's coming towards you and your intuition tells you, hey, I'm about to get robbed. Well, why? You cannot describe why. If I asked you why, your intuition just told you it was going to happen, but your intuition noticed that, well, the guy had his hood up, or he was acting weird, or he crossed the street at the wrong time, and he was, those are things your intuition catches that you don't, but you can't.
But he could be completely innocent, right?
It could be, and most of the time you're going to be wrong. But every once in a while, you're going to be right, and it's going to save your ass. That's when
I walk around with hoodies before, and I'm walking around with hoodies sometimes at night if it's cold here in Michigan, and I would hate for someone to feel intuition that I would harm them, but it's possible,
right?
But
and that's why I mean that's what I mean when I say intuition is wrong most of the time. It's just
the times where it's right. You'd be glad that you listened.
Exactly.
That you crossed the street.
Right. That's the whole point. It's not a pathway to truth.
Right.
Because you're wrong most of the time. It isn't a statement of truth. Intuition is not a way to get to truth. That's what we're trying to say.
It's survival. That's it. Like if you use it to determine truth, you're going to be wrong, because if you use it to identify, threats out on the street, you're going to be accusing a lot of people that had no bad intentions, but you only have to be right once to save your ass. So that's why you shouldn't use it to figure out real problems that you have time to figure out.
I agree. Maybe I was confusing intuition with something else, maybe instinct or something like that. That's my fault. But I agree, actually, with everything you guys said.
It would be the same thing, like no matter what word you replace it with, like replace it with the word confidence. Confidence is also not a pathway to truth. You can be confidently wrong. Like that doesn't, in fact, even going to your example from earlier, I mean, witnesses are not necessarily always right. Eyewitnesses can be wrong. They can have seen things wrong. They can lie. They can have been paid off. There's like all kinds of reasons why witnesses should not be a determining factor for an interpretation of anything.
But if you have a number of witnesses that have a similar, it's not going to be always 100% exact. Oh, I saw this person at 3 a.m. I saw this person at 3:03 a.m. Oh, throw all the witnesses out the water because they got the times that they saw things 3 minutes apart wrong. It's going to be a collective agreement of, okay, this person has this A, B, C. They seem to line up.
Witnesses can be
corroborate.
used to corroborate evidence, but I don't think you'd want to be sent to jail for murder based solely on testimony, would you?
Well, there's a lot of men who wouldn't want to be sent to jail for rape, for sexual assault. But in a lot of cases, it's usually only between that man and that woman who had that experience. So do you not listen to the testimony of the woman and what evidence? You can say, well, we don't see any evidence of
well, I think you're innocent until proven guilty. So just because they're accused, they still have to have evidence to validate that the person was there to begin with. They're not just going to throw you in jail because somebody accused you.
I agree.
Well, he's saying that if all you have is the testimony of the woman,
sometimes that is the case.
That's all you got in the end, and that it makes for a weak case, but they do get convicted. Like I don't want to get into the morality of or the ethics of how that should work.
Yeah,
but it sounds like, Yosef, it sounds like you do have a process that you're using. I would just take issue with the process itself. I don't think that it's the best process because it's not one that's using falsifiability, and you're not eliminating other possibilities necessarily.
Well, he hasn't eliminated yours yet, so
right.
I don't know.
You are definitely trying to be rational and use a process. I'm not convinced it's the right one.
That's the thing I was going to get to is if me going through the process of elimination comes to the conclusion that is not satisfactory, or you feel like I should be doing more to come to a conclusion that would make more sense to you, then that's not fair because it's not your experience.
What we're concerned with is we're concerned with helping you use a method that's reliable so that you can actually determine the truth. It's not about convincing us anymore. Like we can't be convinced by your dream. Elliott's already made that clear. But if you had a method that you could test and independently verify, then we also would be convinced because we could independently verify whatever it is that's going on. But you have an event that took place once. It can't be duplicated. And if it could, how would you duplicate it? It would have to be repeated exactly the same. And in order for it to be verified as so supernatural of some sort, that would also kind of require a third party to independently verify it, because that's a claim about something that nobody can believe apart from faith, because there is no sufficient evidence for that.
I gave the third party verification that had not, that this,
yeah,
this
you gave a third party verification that something crazy happened, not that it was supernatural. I'm not questioning that your dream was crazy weird. I'm not even questioning that it might not be explainable. I have no idea. I'm just not convinced that you have done enough. You've put forth enough of the research and study on this dream to be able to draw the conclusion that you have. That's all I'm saying. Like, so essentially,
true. It doesn't.
What's that?
So even if it was true, according to him, it doesn't matter, because you're saying, for me, I should still be in a space of skepticism of, well, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. This is something that happened maybe 5-6 years ago. At some point, I have to come to a conclusion. Now,
no, you don't. You don't have to come. This is the mistake that so many people make. They feel like they have to draw a conclusion, and then you draw a conclusion in a sloppy way that actually is not true. You don't have to draw a conclusion. Like when you actually don't. When you actually don't. What's that?
You just said that it's not true. That's you projecting that it's not true for you.
No, I'm not saying
that the conclusion I came to wasn't sufficient enough evidence for it to be anything other than what I came to.
Well, the reason I know that that's the case is because you've already admitted that Elliott's proposition might be true. So you've given me enough evidence from our conversation to tell me that you haven't done the work to draw to draw a conclusion that's warranted. You still have some work to do in order to draw a conclusion that's warranted, because you haven't eliminated all possibilities. Is all I'm saying. So I'm not saying your conclusion is wrong. It very well may be supernatural and the Holy Spirit. I'm just saying, if it turns out you're right, it's because you guessed.
We just don't have enough information. Because it's a dream, we just don't have enough information to come to a conclusion. So we're not coming to one.
Guess is a very strong. Yeah, that is a huge leap to say that. I guess that it was God. I guess it was just God. That's a naive.
If I'm playing Clue and if I'm sure it's the wrench and I'm sure it's Colonel Mustard, but I'm unsure about the kitchen or the library, and I choose one, what am I doing?
Yeah, but that's not.
I'm guessing, right?
Supposing that that's my case.
But I'm saying it's your case because you said Elliott's could still be a possibility. So you've literally guessed. You said, well, I don't know which one it is. I like this one better. I'm just going to choose it.
I said for him, it could be a possibility for him and how he perceives the dream. Even if it was true to him, he could still say, oh, coincidence, lottery number, total chance. And that will be right for him to say. But that's not for me to determine how he perceives it. I can't do that because he's his own entity, his own person. It just so happens the man that I told it to, that it was pertaining to, for him, it was spot on. And it shocked me. So that was enough evidence for me to go, okay, it is more than just coincidence. It's more than just chance. But prior to that, I'm going through the mental, logical process, maybe too much, and thinking, no. It's got to be this, anything but that, until I told him, and he said, whoa. And I'm like, whoa. And that was like, that's it. That's all I can do. And then from there, in prayer, intellectually, I can't understand how that's possible. I can't make something like that happen again out of nowhere. I can't verify a second dream similar in nature. It's something that happens spontaneously that I'm like, I can't turn it on and off. I wish I could. It'd be kind of cool. oh, I can just have dreams like that of intuition and telling people about themselves. But it happens when I don't want it to happen, or when I'm least expected.
Joseph,
that's how it goes.
We've hit our 20-minute mark.
Yeah. 30 minutes ago.
30
minutes ago. We have got to end.
We got to end, but it's too much fun to talk to you, Joseph. I really enjoy our conversations. Hey, I have another book I would love for you to read. If are you a reader, or are we just throwing books out for no reason?
Big time. No, I love books.
I want you to read my book, and it's not published yet, so you get an opportunity to read it for free right now.
It's called It was called was it Revolution? D something?
Unravelation.
Unravelation.
Yeah. If you email me, I will send you the links because it's in Google Docs right now. And I would really love for you to read it because I think it might really help you.
Did you put your email in the private chat maybe? So I
did. I'll throw it in. I'll throw it in the main chat right now because I don't care if anybody has it.
And it's unfortunate because we never even got to the proof that I had at hand. But that's another time.
Hey, that's
quite a bit of proof.
We've just gone so long tonight. Yeah.
There you go. It's Alan@unravelation.com. You see it there?
In the private chat?
No, I put it in the public, but all right. It'll be easier. It'll probably be easier for you in the private chat. Sorry. Here you go.
I got it.
You got it?
I got it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So just shoot me an email. Let me know it's you, and I'll link you up because yeah. Anyway, in fact, are you on Facebook?
I am.
All right. Find me on Facebook and friend me, and then it's probably easier to just chat on Messenger than it is to do the slow, laborious emailing process.
I agree.
So if you're willing to do that, just hopefully you can find me on Facebook, Alan Bondar. You should be able to track me down. Here, okay. I'll even throw the link in right here so you can find me easier.
Oh man, y'all, I'm looking at it's like I got 4 or 5 different things. That's okay. We'll get to it next time, maybe.
Yes, we will.
I did take some notes. I took some notes. I was curious. I said, well, they got a point. I had a summary idea, but I wanted to get more detail, and I got the detail right in front of me. But that's okay. We'll get to it when it's time, I guess.
I just put my Facebook in the private chat, so you can grab that easy.
Yeah, whatever you brought tonight, bring it back next week, and we'll definitely get to it.
Yeah, we don't mind talking to you, dude. You're great. I really do enjoy our conversation. So, but yeah. dude, send me a DM and let's chat because I definitely want to get you this book because I would love for you to read it.
I'm gonna read it. No more questions. I just read it.
But bring it next week because I want to know this method. I'm looking forward to hearing about this. I feel bad that we had to cut it short, but try and call in a little earlier, man, so we can have longer to talk. Because by the time you call in, we're like exhausted and it's too late. So we start at 6 Eastern.
But hey, we gave you a solid hour, so that's something.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's you're just enjoyable to talk to. Anyway, all right. So Joseph, thank you so much for joining us, buddy. We'll talk. I look forward to your DM, and we'll talk soon, bud. Have a great week.
Take care.
All right, everybody. So if you're still here, hanging in tough, don't forget this Friday night is a special debate between Robert and JL on moral realism versus anti-realism right here on Skeptic Haven. So make sure you check that out. It's going to be at, I think, 7 p.m. Central, if I'm not mistaken. That sounds right, 8 p.m. Eastern. Yep. So check that out. And then next week is a special episode with Jim Barrows and Elliott's Leaving Christianity, Why It Hurts. So check those out. It's going to be a great time. And we guys, thank you very much for being a part of it. There's the lineup for the whole week. Let's talk Deconversionists, the Life After Faith, Critical Call, and Thought Experiment. Although Life After Faith is taking a short break, which is one of the reasons we're actually doing a couple of more non-Christian type shows for the next couple of weeks. So you guys can call in and get your fix if you need to. Although it's not with Drew, but it is with Alan and Elliott. So take it or leave it. Here we are. Join us on Deconversion Nation on Facebook. Please come over. We'd love to have some conversations with you. It's a great place for you to ask atheists questions if you have them. Because a lot of times you don't ever get a chance to talk to an atheist. So this will be a great place for you to do that, especially if you're a theist. We welcome you to the conversation. So bring it on over. And then don't forget to check out my series, Unravelation, How Those of Faith Find Freedom. You'll find that on the Unraveler channel, which is in the link below in the info. So make sure you check that out. Release a new episode every week, two times a week, Mondays and Thursdays. We got them coming out, and they correlate with the show topic that we do each week. So check those out, and be back next week for Jim and Elliott. Elliott, any closing thoughts?
That'll do.
That'll do, Pig. All right. Well, everybody, thanks for joining. And remember, everybody has their own version of Christianity. We're here to unravel your conversion. Good night, everybody.